We may be joined by a couple of other people, but we have a quorum, so we are prepared to start.
All right, we're ready.
You have been here before, Kathy, so you understand the process. Introduce yourself and Brenda, and then briefly outline the nature of this year's request, and then we'll open up it up for questioning from the commissioners.
Sounds perfect. So I think everybody would have received one of our presentations, but I'm Kathy Ward. I've been before you before for requests, and we certainly want to thank the board for what you've done for helping us preserve that building at 17 India Street. And this is Brenda Williams, for those of you who might not have met her. She's our new president of the board for the thrift shop, and has agreed to keep me on as a project coordinator, if you will, for keeping the building, on track to achieve what we're trying to do, stabilizing the building. But before we even get into what our request is for, we could not have done this without you guys. We could not have preserved that building. We had been somewhat hoodwinked in the past with people before we got to know Brian Pfeiffer, who helped us understand what the building needed. He did a thorough examination of the building, and then systematically we've been going through the checklist that he gave to us, using the monies that you had given to us in the past to go through the checklist. You still have part of that checklist to go through. And as you might imagine, when you go through an old building, you uncover something. And one of the things in the request for this time is that we've uncovered, where we had some light flickering, that we have cloth wiring still in that building. So that's one of the things that we are requesting this year. And Exhibit H in our binder goes through what needs to be done. There's still gutter work that needs to be done on the back side of the house. There are some windows that they're the original windows to the house, so Michael's trying to figure a way to build the frames and build the molding, because the way those sashes go in, the whole thing goes in. It's not just that you can pop something in. So he's trying to figure a way to make it to preserve it like it is. He's been absolutely phenomenal. If anybody ever needs anybody to do something, a lot of the building has shifted, and so some of the windows that we're hoping that he'll be able to repair too don't close all the way, just because the way the building has shifted to the east. So that's part of what we'll be asking for in this one. We found, because we're trying to discern, I guess, if we need a new roof or not. So when we went up in the third floor where we do store some stuff, it was apparent that we're not getting good circulation through the building. So one of the volunteers' husband did put us a hatch over it and a screen so that we can open it in the summertime to get air through it. So you'll see this is marked off and it's completed by a volunteer. The shingles on the east side of the building, we cleaned them. They're pictures of that, they're just not holding up. It was suggested by Michael that side be re-shingled. It hasn't been re-shingled and we don't know how many years. So that's part of this. And then the masonry, a few years ago when they totally dug out the east side of the building on the rubble foundation, we didn't do the west side of the building because Penn got busy. So now we need to address the west side of the building, where you can actually stick your hand through some of the rubble foundation. And we had a landscaper who was going to help us. Part of the problem has been the water getting on the building. So we had a landscaper coming on that west side of the building to give us a plan for moving the water away and draining it toward the back. And then I happened to see Penn on the street and said, "Penn, we need you to get this work." She said, "Let me come by there." So I showed her. She says, "Do not move that soil until I can get this fixed, because the soil's holding that foundation up." So there again, the more we try, the more we find that we need to get done. And then in what we call the linen room, which is where Brenda's the queen of the linen room, there's lead paint all over everywhere that we did not know was lead paint until the painter was doing some other work and he identified that as lead paint. So that needs to be taken out and redone and made safe for those of us who work in that building. And then for Michael to move that water away from the house as part of the project as well. And he had moved water away on the east side of the building once we got that rubble foundation fixed. And then, of course, to do the electrical work. So every time we open one little thing, there's something else that comes with it. So, but we're very thankful for you guys to make it possible. I think you've given us the confidence to dig and do what needs to be done to preserve that building. So happy to answer any questions on any of this.
Well, if you're looking at me.
I'm looking at all.
He's looking at all of us, truly.
Should we close this door?
But is
Yes,
it?
please.
Yeah, please go right
Okay.
ahead. Thanks.
How's everyone?
Hi.
You're early.
That's okay.
So, in your Schedule A, public charity status and public support, where it says name of supported organization, the Nantucket Hospital, it says that you donated them $331,000 in total. Why? I mean, that's an organization that's raised $80 million for a new building. Why isn't some of this money going? It does. Let me rephrase that. How much money do you put in, apart from what you donate to the hospital, to sort of into the building every year yourself?
We hold a building maintenance line item in our budget every year. It's got $40,000 in it.
Uh-huh.
And this year, we spent $9,000, almost $10,000 of our money, the hospital thrift shop money. We spent out of the monies that you guys had awarded us $13,000. So we've tried to be responsible and do work ourselves, you know, pay for that, and then use your money toward what was identified through Brian, and then this wiring problem and some of the other issues that have come up.
So, if I could continue on that
Sure.
vein, I do have some other questions.
Okay.
But specifically, surely the hospital could do without some of your annual donation every year to help you accelerate some of the maintenance that where no one is disputing, I think, what you're saying.
Well, there's a difference between maintenance and restoration.
Or restoration.
So the monies that we have given to the hospital for the last several years have been toward equipment that is worn out or needed. And I'll give you the example, the beds that are going in the new hospital, we purchased last year for the new hospital. We bought the equipment that they needed for a state mandated clean room for the pharmacy that they didn't have the money for. So we are a lifeline. So any new equipment that is purchased for the hospital comes from money that is generated through the thrift shop.
Well, that surprises me in terms of, I just feel a little skeptical that an organization that can raise 80 million for a new building can't raise another $1 million for whatever needs to be raised for state-of-the-art equipment. But I don't want to, I'm not trying to be rude.
No, I
in
understand
any
what
way.
you're saying, sure.
Thank you.
I guess from my vantage point is, the purpose of the thrift shop is to support the hospital financially. And are you part of the process when they say, you know, it looks like we need to replace the beds, or the money's gonna go to XYZ? So you're part of the conversation as to where that donation goes?
Margot sends us a wish list every year. And actually, Brenda's called a special meeting that'll be next week, because we just got the list from Margot of equipment that is worn out for the new hospital that needs to be replaced. So moving it over to the new hospital just doesn't make sense, it's worn out. So we get to say, because there have been times, and I'll give you an example, when they were looking at, we call it the green light building, which is on the corner of where the
Yes.
5 corners are there. So, not 5 corners, but there by the school. It's a house that the hospital owns, and they redid this right on Prospect Street. And so one of the years Margot asked us to refit that, and we said, no, that's not in our mission. Our mission is to help you with equipment that you would not ordinarily be able to purchase. So to go back to Ian's question on, we raised, over $110 million now. Part of that goes to what will be part of the housing for, because we have a hard time in the summertime getting places for, summer doctors and nurses to live. So with any project, there's always going to be unexpected expenses. And this equipment right now and in the past has been, things that were not planned, just like our wiring, had not been planned, so.
The only other thing I was, because I'm the project manager and I've walked them through everything, and they're more than efficient with the dollars and the kind of contractors they use. This is considerably less than what they've asked for in the past. So, I just want to throw that out. It's not a small amount of money, but they've done a good job with the funds we've given them. They're looking for some more. That's my input.
And one of the other things in our mission statement is not only, to make money for the hospital, but to also provide affordable goods to the community. And we stay open 2 nights a week for those who work and are not able to come during the work day. And, when you can buy something that's worth $100 when it was brand new and it's still in good shape, you can buy it for $10. And we feel that there's a twofold purpose to what we do.
Well, I'm certainly taking advantage of that. Every time I walk by, I live up the road, I probably pop my head in twice a week.
Oh, good. We love it.
John?
I think that this ask is reasonable, and I think that you've done a good job with the estimates and so forth, with doing this restoration work to the building. And I think it's important that you do donations, like significant donations to the hospital, because that's why people donate the items to you. They want it to go there. I'm a little bit concerned that if you're giving financial support to their housing proposal.
No, we're not.
Okay.
No.
I'm just going to raise this because I'm worried that the hospital is setting itself up for a major PR problem because their new housing proposal eliminates the building that houses Fairwinds, family planning, and the drop-in center.
They're working on that.
Okay.
I spoke to them the other day.
I'm just bringing it up.
Yeah.
That
Say
I'm
that
just
again,
very
Lauren.
worried that the hospital has a new housing proposal for their parcel that's at the back of
85
White
units.
Village. And in its drawings, it eliminates the building that houses Fairwinds, drop-in center, and family planning. And those are critical human
Oh, yeah.
services to this
I
island.
spoke to Fairwinds, and they're working on a solution
Yeah,
as we speak.
But the hospital should be supporting this.
Yes, not you
Much
guys.
good.
Not you guys. I'm just
No,
raising
we're
that.
not.
Yeah.
That's
Not
a
you
whole
guys.
other situation.
We have no
Yeah.
part in those decisions.
No, we're the
I
equipment.
feel like people should just know about it.
No, Margot, gives us a list of what she dreams for, the equipment, so.
Other questions? Ian, you said you had other questions?
Oh, well, just, I mean, just when I see the picture of, the leaking window, and I'm thinking, good God almighty, you don't have volunteers that can help fix a leaking window? And I'm thinking I should be volunteering for
Oh,
that.
come on down. We would
Yeah,
love that.
that's sort of, I mean, I'm sure my
I mean,
wife
most of our
would.
volunteers are women, so, and not to be sexist, but they're also retired ladies.
Right.
But
Right.
to give you an example of something that happened this week, we noticed a leak on the floor in the basement and traced it back up to the sink and the little kitchenette area that we have there. And the floor under there is all gone. And so Todd Winship, who a lot of you know, took everything out, crawled up under there and put a pan under there so that we can get to whatever the problem is that's there. So we do have Todd.
Yeah.
Todd works with us sometime. We've had some of the other husbands come in and do some work for us. So there has been that kind of work that's been
Well,
done.
part of the issue too, Ian, is that working with Brian Piper, we're working with respect to an appropriate historic preservation and restoration. And so it isn't just sort of fixing a window. It's in fact making sure that you stay consistent with respect to the appropriate restoration of that particular area.
Right.
Linda?
I've got to commend you on how well you've managed the money that you've gotten so far, and the work you've been able to do so far, because that building doesn't need assistance, but you guys are good stewards of this building. You really care about the actual building, not just the thrift shop part of it, but the structure.
We do, and the other day I heard a hammer, and I went running downstairs, and this guy, we do have one guy who works in the basement, he's an architect, and I said, stop the hammer, don't put any nails in anything. He said, it's not gonna hurt anything. I said, no. So they call me the nail Nazi down there. I don't want anybody putting any nails in that building now that it's, up and, been replastered and had a lot of work done.
Now, this is a really reasonable amount compared to what we normally see from historic preservation. This is a multi-year process for you guys. You're coming back again next year for another phase of this?
Well, we
talked
don't
about
know.
this.
We don't know. We, like I said, we need to look at the roof. We've got to have somebody get up on the roof because it's been a while since the roof's even been examined. And so when they're up there doing the gutters, fixing those, then it might be that they say, oh, this needs to be taken care of.
And keep in mind, there's grants. They're not big. It's like a $25,000 grant from the state Mass Historic. So
Okay.
there are other things you can do
Sources
to
of
keep
funding.
going after
Okay.
our funding.
Yeah.
But to sort of start looking at the state level, because it's a historic structure.
Well, we're feeling, if we can get these things done that we have, because there's still some things that we need to get done this year, that, that we can't do it while we're, open. So the work doesn't start until November, and it has to end by, March, when we start, having volunteers in there.
Just one more question on Sally's electrical work. Is she gonna bring everything up to code for you guys?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
because that's like a safety issue. I mean, the
Oh,
wiring
yes.
and all this, I'm like, oh my God,
Building
if the
could
place
burn
gets on fire, I'm gonna be
Well, the
upset.
other thing is that you didn't come back to us the immediate year after your first grant.
No.
Yeah.
You waited to make sure to see what that did for you, and then you determined this additional work,
Right.
which is why you're coming back.
Yeah.
They've been
Right.
very
Barry, and
Very
then
precise.
go on again.
Yeah, so, the deed to the property proper,
Mhm.
I'm trying to go back to, is there an interrelationship outside of, between you and the hospital,
No, we are a separate
No, you're
501c3.
right?
We have a deed restriction on that house.
Right,
We have been told many times, sell it, give the money to the hospital, and we said no.
that's fine, no.
So,
Is the hospital ever made aware of your needs in terms of doing things? I mean, you're very generous to them.
I don't think
Do
they
they-
have I don't think they would be able to do that.
there's no
What
plan.
is something-
They actually are necessary, I'm just saying, they're gonna be very necessary to provide community benefits back into the island as well, too. Third question I have for you is, do you do any external fundraising for the building or
We can't,
anything?
according to our bylaws. do any
According to your
external
bylaws, okay.
You can get grants, which is why I want you
funding. We
to
can
start
receive
looking.
grants, but we can't, we can't do
But we can't
fundraising.
do, any fundraising we do has to be for the hospital, I mean.
Yeah.
Through sales.
I understand, okay. So the final question I have for you, I'm gonna turn to Dawn for a second. Give me a minute, because I want to phrase this the right way.
I wasn't raising my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you did.
Can I just answer, I think,
Yeah.
one of the things you were alluding to about putting money back in the community. Part of the privilege of building a hospital, the state requires that you take 5% of the maximum estimated building cost and put it back into the community over a 5-year period of time, which for us is about $4.3 million. And in that $4.3 million, we can use 5 years to disseminate the money. There are 4 sectors identified by the community that the money should go toward. So we have about 40 community members who are on these 4 different sectors.
Oh, the CHIP grant.
Yes, but you can't, it's not for capital.
Right.
It's not for improvements like that. It's for healthy initiatives.
Mhm.
So I felt that was where you were going with that, so I just wanted to put that out there.
where are you in relationship to where the building is at and saying there's one fine day when everything's done? So I see the snapshot here, but the question becomes, how much more?
You know what, I'm almost thinking that unless something happens.
Yeah.
Then we should be in really good shape after this year.
Okay.
Because we thought we were in good shape until we knew about the wiring. And so I think the wall was the biggest thing, that wall that was bulging out into the driveway.
Mhm.
So these are little things, and I think once we get these big things taken care of, we should be able, with our, line item in our budget, take care of ourselves. So we're hoping that this could be perhaps one of the last times we have to come back.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that helps.
And it may not be. I can't promise you, if we were to
No,
find
I-
something, God forbid, something really bad, we'd be in trouble.
But I think as an organization, as our organization, CPC, it's kind of good for us to know too
course.
what's coming down the pipeline, where are we at in relation to
Of
this.
course.
So that helps.
Yeah, well, you've been very generous with us, and we want to acknowledge that, and we do every time we get a chance on the work that's being done. We acknowledge that you guys have given us the confidence to do it, because like I said, we've been shystered in the past, and now we've got some reputable people working with us.
I probably dare say just about everyone in this community has one,
Yeah, well, when
We
you got
can all
all
swap,
gray haired
yeah.
little ladies working down there, it's pretty easy to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, just to follow up on one of Barry's questions, why can't you change your bylaws so that you can have fundraising?
We probably could. I'm not sure how we would go about it, and at what point, because we go down to almost no volunteers on the island during the off season.
Yeah.
And during the season, it takes about 120 volunteers a week to make that thing hum. And to ask us to take on one other project, we tried it once with a fashion show a couple of years ago, remember, Linda? And it just became bigger than we could do. So we've chosen that we don't have the manpower to do it.
Well, I guess I was thinking of a general appeal rather than a fashion show. But
I
take
hear
your
what you're
point
saying.
about-
We have one full-time person who works for us, and I think that would be a burden that we would need to hire more people to do, or some outside firm to do it. So it's something we could think about, but I'm not sure how we'd go about it.
There are people that can help you write grants, so, and Mass Historic and places like that, so.
Are there any other questions? Is there any additional information that anyone would like to have the clerk shop provide us prior to our deliberation?
Well, thank you all
Hearing
very
none,
much.
then thank you
Thank
very,
you.
very much. And
Thank
again,
you.
on behalf of the board, as you've heard, you've done a very responsible job with respect to the money that was entrusted with you. And we were very pleased with that.
Thank you. We try to be good stewards.
Well, I have to say, I think that looking at the work that you're planning and the amount that is being spent, that you're getting very good value for money by Nantucket standards.
I'll tell you, the guys that are on that list, if you ever need that kind of work, they're the best. Thank you. You wants to come out first, or you want to come in? Thank you.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Are we live as well too?
Oh,
that's
that's
right.
right. Well, you know what, I got from mom in, because I'm not.
There's your stuff.
Oh,
thank you.
The town set this up because, the water company has hearings has to be recorded as well.
No, it's good to know.
So are we recording or we're not on TV?
We are.
Had my makeup.
Oh, now we're looking up there?
No, that little thing right under there, and if you notice, the mic's alive.
I know the mics are live, but it's TV, we have a TV. Oh, cool.
Yeah, there you go.
My pocketbook's got my pen.
Point is that they're out there.
Right.
Yes, that's pretty good.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry, we
Yeah.
didn't mean to intrude earlier.
No,
but,
don't worry about that.
Well,
Just
we
said,
know,
just said.
we know you're very pushy.
Well, here,
I think it's a
Here.
good thing.
is this a good place, Maria? Is where the hot seats?
Right.
Yes, thank you.
Good morning. This is your first time before us, so this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Preservation Committee to hear the applicants relative to their application. Because you are a new applicant, we have allocated about 1 hour of time for you to be able to go through. You don't have to use.
I don't think I can talk for that long.
Well, but we can talk a lot.
Oh, okay, good, that's good.
What we'd like to do is have you take 10 or 15 minutes to sort of flush out your presentation
Right.
to us with respect to the key points, and then I will open it up to the board members with respect to questions. I need to inform you that this is videotaped and recorded in accordance with the town bylaws.
Okay.
So, and gone.
I just need to make a disclosure for the record that my mother-in-law resides in one of these units.
That does not
Has any real
preclude you
bearing.
from participating or voting, but it's a very.
But I should,
So, welcome, please identify yourselves and your organization, and then start to give us your spiel.
Thanks, Ken. My name's Quint Waters. I'm the outgoing president of Landmark House, and this is Ella Finn, who's the executive director of Landmark House. I think I know most of you, I think, I've met you over the years. And we're here really to, well, first of all, the presentation. I'm sorry it's so fat. About a third of it is the presentation, and the rest is the financials and all the other stuff that are attached to it. So don't let that scare you. We're here to discuss Landmark House's request for a CPC grant in the amount of $188,985. And we intend to use the money to purchase and install all new replacement windows at the Landmark House. We believe that the project fulfills one of the objectives of the Community Preservation Act, which relates to the support of housing in the community, because we are providing 25 affordable housing units for senior and low income people and handicapped people. The details of the proposal are in the first part of this package. And we'd be glad to answer any questions you have. I think Ella has a little bit of information on what we do and at the Landmark House and what we have been doing for the past few years.
May I pass these out to you just there for
Yeah.
for your pleasure? So Landmark House and Grossman Wing, which are two 501c3s, are two buildings which are joined. So Landmark House is the original building which was refurbished and opened in 1986, and that was after the very great efforts of the community led by Bernie Grossman to restore the building which was going to be demolished. That was conveyed to Landmark House from the town. It was a town building originally called the Asylum, not necessarily for insane people. That was a refuge for people of lesser means. The last, just of a note of interest, the last two Native Indians on the island lived and ended their life at Landmark House, which I think is pretty cool. So we are we're funded by Rural Development, which is the part of the United States Department of Agriculture, and also by HUD, the Housing and Urban Development entity. And they subsidize our tenants' rents to the tune of 70%. So our tenants qualify, or one is eligible to live there if one's income is below $38,950 a year. And whatever your income is below that level, the tenant is responsible for 30% of their adjusted income becomes their rent. And then HUD and rural development subsidizes the balance up to the amount that we agree to be able to operate our budget on. This year, that rent is $1,100 is what we're budgeting for. So obviously you can all do math. So it's a very affordable for people of very limited means. And we have people who, you know, are at the higher end, and we have people who are at a very low end of the scale. Many of the people who live with us have lived with housing insecurity, have lived with food insecurity, you know, two of the things that are considered very basic tenets of a decent life. So it's independent living, not assisted living, but of course we're there in a supportive role for residents. We have a live-in caretaker, so one of the apartments we don't receive a subsidy for, and we have the caretaker live there in exchange for doing caretaking duties, and he's available, so that if we have alarms going off, or if an ambulance comes in the middle of the night, or somebody has an emergency, he's present. Each person has their own apartment. They're about 500 square feet. They have a kitchen. And while the residents live independently, as I mentioned, they're supported. To that end, we have, and in line with our mission to provide services or to support the provision of services for seniors in the community, we have Elder Services has their offices in our building, and we give it to them at a very modest rent. So that Sherry Hunt, who's the director there, I'm sure you all know her. She sits in the office right next door to me. Many of the people in the building avail of those services. So it's pretty tight-knit, pretty close. But again, private and independent. So that's about what we do. I also do some advocacy work in the community, largely for seniors. The Housing Stakeholders Board. I've sat on the Council on Aging, the Council for Human Services, and I do some voluntary work with Saltmarsh. Most recently we did our senior cruises. We took 170 people out on a 1-hour cruise in the harbour this summer. That was lots of fun. And I work on an advisory board for the Community Foundation. So we try to stay in touch with what's going on in the community, offer our 10 cents and support insofar as we can. So the reason we're looking for these new windows is the building, of course, is quite old. The government entities, while they subsidize our budget, they don't often recognize the very high cost of living and contracting work, etc., on Nantucket, and they don't recognize it, and it's really not their concern. You know, they say, well, a similar facility on the mainland can do it for this, and they just don't understand the island living part of it. So in order to replace windows, it's a big deal. It will allow us to save about 30% in energy costs, which of course goes directly to the residents because they each pay their own utility bill.
It's electric heat.
So for that reason, I mean, it's a big undertaking for sure, but the contractors that we're working with and from whom we've received proposals have told us that once, you know, if we can get the project started, it will be it won't be intrusive to the residents. They would do about 2 windows a day or 1 apartment a day. So we done in a fairly timely manner.
I have a bunch of,
Yeah, me too.
I think you and I are
I
on
have
the
a
same
question for
direction.
Ken first, though. This is under historic preservation
It
and not
shouldn't be.
affordable housing. Is that
Well,
because we didn't originally create it?
Well, no, it was the point that I was gonna make, okay? The problem that we have, and this is why I made available for the committee the areas that we're able to fund, is that in the area of historic preservation, we're allowed to preserve, but we're not allowed to support. In the area of housing, we're allowed to support, but that, what you're talking about here is maintaining, which is rehabilitation and restoration. And the problem that we have is that the way that the law is passed is that it can only be supported if the property was acquired or created with CPA funds, which in this instance is not the case. The situation where we are able to do something with respect to housing that doesn't
Mhm.
fall outside that, is that we're able to do something that protects the housing structure from future injury, harm,
Mhm.
or destruction, which is a definitive finding that we have to make.
Mhm.
And the problem is that, as I read through this, I didn't see you qualifying in either of those two categories with respect to our ability to fund you. So the way it's presented now, if it's possible to be able to restructure this application within the context of it, to try and come within that, then we can consider it. But as far as I can see right now, the application that's presented doesn't meet either of the two criteria that allows us to be able to fund what you're asking us to fund. So Linda and Dawn.
One of my problems, it was actually the almshouse was moved in from Pulpus somehow. I don't know how they moved that building in, but it didn't start there. It started way
In
out of
Quays,
town.
yeah.
Crazy how they got that huge building in. It was called the almshouse. Is everybody in the building subsidized?
Yes, every unit, excepting the caretaker's unit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's very similar to the housing authority.
Yeah.
Which is why I thought it should be under housing. For the same reason that the housing authority was, we were able to fund the housing authority, we were able to fund the rehab on some of the units
Well,
over at let me finish first. The issue here is that, like with Academy Hill, a lot of them are subsidized, is that Academy Hill is putting back is rehabbing the original wood, the original windows, things like that, they're wood. What's happening here is that they've got windows that are in desperate need of repair for some of the same reasons that Academy Hill is, and housing authority structures. But they're putting in Anderson 400 series, which are not wood. Anderson doesn't make a wood window. And the storm windows on these windows your windows are terrible. So I'm caught between historic preservation, which would have been, you had to put the wood windows back in.
Right,
Would never,
which we're not doing.
we
No,
would never be able to do that.
and it gets beat to death by the wind. And
Yeah,
the
we're very
northeast wind,
exposed.
especially on that side.
Mhm.
Or it goes into housing, very similar to housing, Nantucket and Housing Authority, that we're protecting subsidized affordable housing.
That's not the criteria, Linda. Unfortunately, the criteria is very clear, and the language is that the funds can be used to protect the housing structure from future injury, harm, or destruction. Those words are very specific, and it has to be a specific finding that has been made by this committee in order to be able to legally provide the funding within the housing.
Interesting.
Then how do we do it for Housing Authority, which we
did it
got
under
cleared
historic
for?
preservation.
I know, which bothered me last year.
The determination that there was a lot of discussion with respect to the Myakomet Village property, and because of the nature of what was being done, we were able to, as a committee, make that determination, a specific determination on basis of a motion that was made, seconded, and carried, and was reviewed by town council.
All right, 'cause I went through this with TPC in Boston last year. That's
Dawn
where
has
they
a question.
applied.
Do you think we could make the finding, if we need to go to hurricane rated windows due to its location, that it would be from future destruction?
May I just interject and say that last winter we had a whole series of windows in a sunroom blow in
Yeah.
and cause significant damage, and the entire corner of that building had to be replaced with windows. The HTC has also approved the work that we're looking to do. So it's, while it may not be technically historic, it's of significance, and we have approval for all the work that we want to do.
Yeah,
The
but
HTC approved changing all the materials to fiberglass and fake trim?
They did.
When did they do that? When
That was
we
this-
did. I sit on
Oh.
the HCC.
2 months ago.
So can we, that takes us back to what we were trying to get at, is if it's protecting the building, like Academy Hill and Housing Authority, from further harm or damage, by putting these windows in so they don't leak and they don't blow in and they don't run the risk of weather damage, as well as to the residents, we can't stretch it to go there like we did for the Housing Authority? I'm the housing authority, I have a representative here, so I'm trying to get to the same place that we got to with the housing authority.
I would think it would
That's precisely the
under
intent
hurricane rated
of what we're
windows.
doing, is to,
Right.
is to protect the building from future deterioration.
Right,
And they are gonna have to be hurricane rated, the minute they start replacing that many windows, they're gonna have to bring those windows up to code,
Which
and,
means you'll have to go to the E series.
yeah, or the wood rights, which are very expensive, like $800 a piece.
well, we've been approved for what we've,
Yeah.
you know, what we've gotten estimates for, and, you know, which predicated this, application.
Yeah.
That's,
I would think the building department's gonna make people hurricane rated in that location.
And certainly the storms.
And if they did, then maybe it could fall under,
I don't know
under
that the,
housing
well,
instead of
these
historic
are,
preservation.
I believe the window, I could be wrong about this, but I believe that the windows that we,
Yeah.
that we have in this proposal meet all criteria,
Yeah,
necessary.
Yeah, they
You
would
know,
have
if
to.
hurricane rated is some, I mean, I don't know personally, but I
yeah,
know
I
that
believe
we,
they do.
yeah,
I mean,
because we
These
wouldn't have
are
gone to
these
the
are the ones
agency
that were
without,
recommended by
Yeah.
Marine Home Center.
right,
It's the Woodwright double hung insert
Yeah.
window.
yeah.
That's one of their highest grade windows.
Yeah.
you know.
So, and then specifically, it's to replace old, windows that were installed in the thirties or wherever they were
Right,
installed,
right.
and that have leaked, and we now have rot and, deterioration around the windows. So that's what the intent of this replacement is to preserve the building, actually.
Was the only structure out there besides the tree across the street for
Yeah.
probably 1930s.
So
Really?
if we, as a committee, decide on this individual proposal, that these windows preserve the integrity of the building, is that gonna qualify them for the grant? Like we did with,
That's the category that we are able to, in fact, provide funding for. It's very specific, that preservation and rehabilitation and or restoration.
Do they need to change their application to specifically state that in order to get
Yes.
in under this? Okay,
Yeah.
so they have to amend the application.
It has to move from housing to historic preservation.
It's under historic preservation, right?
On our list,
Oh, okay.
but you gotta change that language, so your language
See,
qualifies.
that's my concern. I'm much more comfortable with this under housing. The Grossman wing, it was built
It's
in the
new.
80s.
Yeah,
I can't qualify that as historic.
It's not
preservation.
historic preservation, I would agree.
yeah.
But that's why we have to make the finding that it's preserving the units from
Well, the gross,
future harm or destruction,
the gro-
which would qualify everything.
right, the Grossman wing, as you mentioned, was an addition, it was actually completed in 2001. Unfortunately, the original building from 1986, construction on that is far superior to that was done in 2001. It's just the way it is. Older was better, is better. Yeah.
86 was the restoration. 2003.
Can we not
Yes.
protect housing units though, the same way that we protect historic preservation? Can we not protect affordable housing?
No,
Can be.
there's different language with respect to housing and historic preservation. And there's case law, and that's why the language is very specific relative to housing, because of the fact that rehabilitation or restoration is only available in the housing sector if the property was in fact originally funded with CPA funds.
Well, like housing in Nantucket, yeah, a lot of those 20 units. or
Yeah,
something,
yeah, but unless you meet the specific criteria of the preservation, preventing future injury, harm, or destruction. Those words are critical determination and have to be made in order to be able to qualify.
So may I ask a question about Academy Hill? I followed some of that in the last couple of years. Would our property not be in the same sort of category, or was Academy Hill started with CPA funds, or
No,
how?
the main building,
They
your
did
main
historic
building would
preservation.
fall under this with the change in the language. It's the newer,
Okay.
it's the other wing that you gotta split that wing out from your proposal. So I think what we're trying to get, at least myself, and what Ken has suggested, is that you modify the proposal to concentrate on the original Alms building
Okay.
and go
Let's not give
there.
instructions yet, Linda, until we.
That's,
figure out.
that's the only, that's where I'm
Academy
headed.
Hill also rebuilt all of these. They're rebuilding the existing windows.
Yeah.
Those are-
It's a big
Right.
difference than putting in all
They're not putting in new windows, they're using the existing wooden windows, and they're in fact restoring them to their original condition, which is.
I wasn't aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, that part I didn't know.
They're 5 times the size of any normal.
I thought the
Yes.
objective of the Community Preservation Act was to create, preserve, or support housing for the community.
That is correct, but the determination that has been come down from the coalition and from the cases indicate the areas of what we're able to do in the different areas. And there is a chart that specifically identifies what we're able to do in each of the different areas.
Ken, is that or, create
Barry has
or,
had his hand.
or is it and?
And or support is what I read,
That's-
is what I've read.
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Barry?
Yeah, so I have a question for you. Just looking through the application, did you, I'm not seeing it here, did you specify this was a historic preservation project?
No,
That's what I said.
All right, good, so that's the first thing. Because I know
Is it-
when,
you know,
that's okay, I know when these come in, we usually are trying to find a category for it sometimes, if it's not directly before us. So I'm not sure where we're all saying, well, you need to modify the application. They haven't dovetailed this into anything yet.
No, in
Okay.
fact, it says
See,
that
we're-
it's
Where,
for the
okay, that's
creation,
what I'm
preservation,
asking.
and support of housing for the community, requesting funds.
Right, that's in support of housing, I'm just saying,
Page
just,
7.
okay. So,
But the problem is that it then goes on to say, to maintain a building, and we're not allowed, we're not eligible to provide funding to maintain a building.
right,
Right. We are eligible to provide funding that deals with the words that we talked about in terms of the determination as to what could qualify for.
and I understand that, so, but I don't wanna get hung up on, are we asking them to relook at the
So
application?
the application on page 7 says the
That's what I'm looking for.
application to the Community Preservation Committee fulfills the objectives of the Community Preservation for the creation, preservation, and or support of housing
Yeah,
for the community by
fine.
requesting funding. So it was not a historic.
Right.
It
Thank
was
you.
a housing request. The problem is that it then goes on to say,
delete,
maintain a
maintain.
building.
Yep,
Yeah. And say it's for preserve the building from any further harm, et cetera, et cetera.
mm,
We could,
And then take the new wings out.
And what you have to be able to do is help us understand what things you're doing, what's the kind of injury or harm that you're helping to avoid in the future, so that we can make the determination that we meet that criteria, that therefore it is eligible for funding within the criteria as set out by the coalition and by the.
Are there any other properties that that might be not a template, but some sort, I mean, I understand what you're saying, I'm just.
Housing Authority,
Housing Authority, Renee.
they're coming in today.
Okay.
You can look at their application.
Okay, that's great, that'll be helpful.
Somebody recap where we're at.
Basically, what you need to be able to tell us that if this doesn't happen, this is the nature of the injury, harm, or destruction that can happen to this building, all right? And that this is serious because it then would affect the ability for the building to survive and to function in its capacity as a shy-less qualified facility
Right.
For the town of Nantucket.
And the, while Linda, you mentioned excluding the Grossman wing, the Grossman wing actually requires more preservation than.
The fact is that since it's not historic,
Right.
that's irrelevant.
right,
The issue is with respect
Okay.
to how can we preserve the housing and how do we meet the criteria of preventing injury, whatever the hell those 3 words are.
Would you, just,
Are you saying they
Yeah,
can
no
apply for the
problem,
new
we can do
section
that.
as well, because
Yeah,
that's the old
you
one?
would
Okay. So you said you can apply for the whole thing, I just wanna make sure,
No,
because
it's-
historic, not
there's
historic.
pictures in here.
whoa, there's like 4 conversations going on, can we, thank you, everyone.
And Maria has not had a chance to speak recently, Maria.
I just, because I'm way getting confused. The example you gave us about the hurricanes blowing out the windows, damaging the interior, is that what we're looking
Yeah.
for? For a perfect example of the integrity of the building in general? Okay.
So I have a couple of
Thank you.
questions
Yep.
which are on a slightly different tack. And although it does sound from what Dawn said, that that you're gonna have to put in different windows if, under this criteria. But so I live in a Victorian in town, built in 1895 or 97, we're not quite sure. And we have all the original windows. And I was pretty shocked by the condition of some of these windows. And then when I looked at your 990, I noticed that for repairs and maintenance on page 10, the total is 23,000 for this enormous building. And I'm thinking, you know, I mean, surely, and so I wonder if you discuss that with me, why you, it seems to me obvious, and please tell me if I'm wrong, that you do not have sufficient money set aside for maintenance, because it's sort of self-evident that it hasn't been maintained. So, you know, we've just finished repainting our house as it happens. And I'm not trying to draw any parallels, except that the windows are 120 years old and they're all in good shape.
Right, and I understand how you might perceive that. We have two 990s in there because we have two 501c3s for the two buildings which are joined. What you're looking at is basically what the government allows us to budget. Of course, we would spend whatever monies we could lay our hands on maintaining the building. The building is safe and sound, you know, and comfortable. We do the best we can, basically. It's a very low income housing, that's what it's for. And I don't know that there's our property is far superior to those one would see on the mainland. In fact, I haven't seen anything that looks remotely like Landmark House.
No, I guess, you know, I see management fees of 35,000, maintenance of 23,000. Are you seriously telling me that the federal government is subsidizing it to the tune of 70%, but won't allow you to maintain the building?
What happens when we have to do bigger projects, a portion of our subsidies every month goes back into a reserve fund, and we have to request the use of reserve funds from that government entity, and they determine whether we can or we can't. So there are things that they don't approve. And they will tell me, you know, go out and get more estimates and try and get a lower price. And they can't appreciate what Nantucket costs.
And you have to be bonded and all this other crap.
Oh, yeah,
goes with it.
absolutely.
Linda's hand was up first, and then Barry's hand.
Too, whether it's sitting down or sitting up,
Right,
taking the water from the.
right, we are.
highway.
Yeah, well, that's,
Let me help.
Thank you.
Ellen here. The housing authority is under rural development also.
yes, that's
We
right.
have
they
a
have some
state
units.
section and a federal section. We have to get our reserve fund approved, and we can't touch it unless we get approval from the feds or the state, depending on which section. We are only allowed to put so much into maintenance, and only so much into reserve, and only so much into whatever. We've got like 20 different things we have to put it in. They have to approve it, and we can't move anything around.
No.
They allow us to do exactly what we are, and if it's more than that, we gotta go beg.
Right.
So if they're under rural development, like we are under rural development, it is so restrictive. That's why the housing authorities come in here, because they won't let us spend the money to do it. So it's crazy system, but
Thank
it's
you,
that
Linda.
way.
So I have a suggestion that we try and put our weight behind our respective political representatives in Washington to get an exemption for Nantucket. I mean, it's clearly not working, and wouldn't that be a good idea to try and follow through on that?
It's the same all over the country. I don't know about that.
It's a point, I think, but that's not a relevant question for our committee. Barry?
So let me ask you a question. Have you gone through those steps of making the application, telling them you need more money
Oh, yeah.
than?
Well, every year we
submit a budget
request,
every year.
I just
Everybody
submitted a
does.
budget yesterday, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And does that budget, in that budget, does that really say to them why we need? So, help me.
We have a capital plan. The budget, basically, if I budget for anything 5% more than what I have this year,
Sure.
They won't approve it.
it would go on forever.
Okay, but work with me for a second.
Sure,
So
yeah.
you have done that, though.
Mhm.
where you've identified that the windows and stuff need to be addressed, this is the additional cost behind it.
Absolutely, but Barry, our reserve fund is only amounts to the portion that we put in there, and that's
I-
all we can use.
All right. And if you need to go above and beyond that,
State, ask for the approval, right?
Right.
Yeah.
just walk me through the process like I know absolutely nothing at the moment.
But we spend what we are allowed, we spend what we're allowed to spend on it. We spend the budgeted amount.
Right.
For maintenance.
Yep.
Yep.
And we also, we add to our reserve, we're allowed to add to the reserve for maintenance
Okay.
a certain amount every year, which is what we do.
Okay.
And that's it, and we don't do anything else. And so in this particular case, we went out for bids to paint, to
Yes.
repaint.
Mhm.
Just the windows,
Just
yes,
Just the windows,
yeah,
right? And that
exactly,
was
just the windows to paint $50,000,
$50,000. And so
Okay.
that's what got us going down this road.
right?
To
That if
try
we could
to say,
replace
well,
them once, it would
Maybe
be
if we,
one and done.
if we can
would
do
go.
this once, we'd get the money somehow to do this, then we won't have to have a bill of 50 grand every 5 years but I'm getting off your original.
Right, so I guess the bottom line I want to hear is HUD has basically denied you. You've made your best application before them at this point, and they've essentially denied you.
They say the funds aren't there, and
You gotta somehow figure it
yeah,
out.
there are possibly, possibly something similar to refinancing, like take mortgages, but that's not,
We haven't explored anything
No.
like that.
not to take on new mortgages for,
And we're not allowed to fundraise.
no. Well, so
You're not.
we haven't gone down that road because we had hoped that we would be able to act,
Yeah, I'm just thinking though, because if you go down those avenues, that really does strengthen your case for us as well too. Have you asked for bids above and beyond Marine Home Center as well?
No.
No, and the reason we haven't is that Marine Home Center is our neighbor. They've been very generous to us to date. They've given us discounts on pretty much any work that we've had done, and they're very responsive. They've also been available to us.
Spent a lot of time consulting with us.
Yes,
on
they've also been
Yeah.
available to us for issues, we oftentimes can't get, I've had a difficult time keeping a carpenter because they don't have one homeowner, they have 26, it's not easy. So Marine Home Center, because of their proximity, because of our history and our relationship with them, we felt really comfortable committing to them or and vice versa, having them commit to us.
Okay.
They help the housing authority as well.
Do they? Yeah, they're very generous.
Musical interlude.
I have a question, if I might. Excuse me.
no.
No, after you.
In your rent that you get from each person, is there a certain percentage that is for maintenance or for upkeep, or is there a percentage out of each person's rent that's used for one specific thing, or does it go into a general fund?
It's the general operating fund, of which that maintenance is a portion that's already determined by the budget.
Right,
Yeah.
but not, so it's hard to.
So we say,
how much you're gonna get every year. What happens if somebody, moves out?
oh, that happens, and
That does
unfortunately, then we have to rehab the apartment, and it takes a few months to refill the apartment. So, for example, last year, because of people changing their minds about it, they'd moved from Florida, well, not Florida, but we had a unit that was vacant for almost 6 months. It took that long to get people in to do the work. And so we didn't get rent for that 6 months. We didn't get any
Big
subsidy.
chunk out.
It is a big chunk.
Oh, yeah, it was. And I've been with the organization for 3 years, and we've had 8 turnovers in 3 years. And before that, I think it was something like 3 in 8 years. People, our wait list is right now at 88 people, and the wait is approximately 5 years.
Yeah,
So-
same thing, when somebody moves out of the housing authority, same issue, is that you're so tight on what you're allowed to spend and what you have to keep your reserves at and everything else, that if somebody does move out, especially for a length of time, because we rehab when they move
Right.
out.
Yeah.
You are hurting for certain, until you can get a person back in that.
Well,
thing.
and you
Rural
can't-
development really has, it really stranglehold on everybody.
But, and you really can't, you can say, I anticipate 2 apartments next year will need, will be vacated. But
You never know.
I can't predict when people are going to move on.
No, or
so
how long it's going to take to do the apartment.
Yeah, that's difficult. So, and then I also have to give people time to move, to get their affairs in order to move into an apartment. It's, there are costs involved that aren't apparent in the budget. And part of that is, a project like this, we'd love to do it. We think it would be a huge benefit. It'll save our residents and ourselves as well 30% in energy costs.
And protect the building.
And mostly protect the building. And we try to do something every year. We put in the budget.
Are your windows mostly on the east side?
Half of them are on the water side. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
are most of your windows in need of repair on the east side?
Sort of the northeast side,
Yeah,
northeast side.
yeah, that's the one that takes
Takes the wind.
brunt
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the storms.
Yeah, we lost half of
Right.
the roof last winter.
Yes.
So, will the group be satisfied if they come up with, if they rephrase, they don't have to rewrite the whole grant, obviously, but rephrase with those key elements that we require to
Well,
fund it?
what we're gonna request is that they provide us supplemental information in order to help us make the determination that their request is critical in terms of preventing the structure from future injury, harm, or destruction.
I guess can I get a copy of the language?
Future,
This is it.
Oh,
protect
that's
the
right.
structure from future injury, harm, or destruction.
Thank you. Okay.
And with those
And I was just
photos not in
wondering
there-
whether any of the pictures in here of the deterioration
Pictures are
were
good.
sufficient to,
Yeah, yeah,
to
those are in there.
to justify
Yeah.
the type of
Quinn, we
deterioration
have to
we're
make a
talking about.
determination that you fit within that criteria. If we can't make that determination, then we can't fund you.
Yeah.
So the narrative is
It's as
critical.
simple as that.
The narrative is critical.
Barry?
No, I'm just thinking you also should mention the HUD process that you've been through.
Yeah, and rural, we do everything as times 2.
No, and I appreciate
Yeah,
that, but
sure.
again, all of a sudden it's reduced to writing at this point. It
Right.
becomes another tool by which,
Sure, yep, no
it
problem.
strengthens the application, I think.
Yeah,
Don't wanna sound like
because
minors.
what it answers the question with respect to the fact that you don't have your own funds to be able to do this.
Right.
So that this becomes a critical request in order to be able to meet the criteria for
Right.
taking it from injury, harm, and destruction. So what you're doing is laying the groundwork, saying that we have explored all the other alternatives to be able to do
Mhm.
that. Those are not available to us, so our only recourse at this point in time to in fact prevent these things from happening to the building is to do this.
And to rewrite that and if that's what would work, in what time?
We don't need you to rewrite something, we'd ask you to just send us an additional
Oh, okay.
information,
Okay.
a separate letter to me as chairman of the
Okay,
committee,
sure.
indicating that based on our discussion, these are the issues that you asked, that we provide additional information
Okay.
for.
Okay.
Is there a deadline for us?
2 weeks,
2 weeks, oh yeah,
Yeah.
no problem.
Ian.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you have a third company involved, East Creek Incorporated, which is a nonprofit private foundation. It manages the endowment. And it shows in its financials that it distributed nearly $70,000, 69,183. Did those all go to the Landmark House?
Yes.
They did,
So-
on a 2/3, 1/3 basis, 2/3 to rural development side, 1/3 to the Grossman wing side. That's how we have to divvy everything up. It's a
So
common level.
it's also
Model.
constrained by these HUD and the rural development laws,
No,
or is it a separate
It's a
nonprofit?
separate nonprofit.
Okay, so you could have put that all into maintenance if you'd chosen. I'm not trying to hammer
Yes, we
the
could.
point of that, but and also surely as a nonprofit foundation, you are allowed to fundraise. I'm a member of a private foundation and we fundraise, the Threshold Foundation. And so you would be able to get more money for maintenance through fundraising through East Creek.
Unfortunately, that's what we have done to date. That $60,000 goes directly to our account to pay for the operation of Landmark House. The difficulty is, at the end of the year, when we submit our actuals, Rural Development then says, well, you budgeted $26,000 for maintenance, I'm just throwing a random figure out, but you actually spent 50. So if you can't operate this building on the budget that we're giving you, we need to talk. And
Sure, we do.
that's the bottom line. They're saying this is for very low income housing. That's what it is. And if it costs you $50,000 to do what we're going to allow 25 for, then you're not meeting the remit either, you know? So every, starting in March after our audit, the questions start. Why does this cost so much? Why didn't you get more bids? Why? And I just finished about 2 weeks ago with answering those questions and just then started the new budget for next year.
And it takes them, they're usually a year behind on approving the budgets. So
That's
you're
right.
sort of playing catch up the whole time.
Barry and then Maria.
No, I'm good.
I have a question through Glenna, if you don't mind. When's our last public hearing for applicants?
October 15th.
October 15th, okay. And then our first round of going through things is on the
Deliberation?
22nd?
That's correct.
All right, because that brings us kind of to a date certain where they need to get things in for us to be able to review it before we get to
Well, I
the
gave it 2
22nd,
weeks of today.
Yeah.
which is the 14th, 18th. Okay, so I just want to make sure we establish that as our deadline mark
That's enough
for
time.
everything again. Okay, good.
for you.
Thanks. No, I appreciate it. I just want to make sure that,
They can submit that amendment to the office.
Yeah, they can, yeah.
You can submit that amendment to the office. You can
Okay.
email it to me,
All right.
and I'll make sure that everyone
Okay.
gets it.
Yeah.
I just have one final
Linda.
thing that we say to everybody. Mercifully, we don't have $7 million worth of requests this year, but
Only 5.
only five.
only 5.
And we usually get about 2.6.
No, we're gonna have much less than that.
Yep.
I know, it's painful. We've got 16 applicants, can you prioritize in the same narrative if we can only do the north side of the building? As opposed to the north, south, east, and west sides of the building? If we only do the north side of the building, can you prioritize the really critical side, which would be the northeast side?
Yes, of course, yeah.
And split the costs up between phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, because there's nothing to preclude you coming back next year to do
Right.
phase 2.
Okay,
Most of
Yeah.
the projects
Yeah.
we have
Yeah.
come back for several years, some 10 years in a row.
Yeah.
But some, you know, you can
Right.
split it up. So if we can reduce the cost of the most critical north side, and then next year come back for the south side and maybe the flanking sides, like the
Okay.
legions come back for 3 different
Okay.
sides.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and of course, we'd love to do the whole thing at once,
Right.
you know,
Of course.
because of disruption. Also, we can't rehouse somebody if we have to vacate
Right.
apartments, so everything that we do has to be done while the person's living there. You know, we don't, obviously, they're not gonna fund hotel rooms.
But if it comes down to
Yes.
us being able to fund
Yes,
you or
I-
not fund you,
Right.
we
We
would
should-
rather
exactly.
fund what
Yes,
you really need to
absolutely.
have happen.
Absolutely.
So in that narrative, split that up again.
Okay.
Okay,
Maybe it's not an exact side, maybe it's a certain number.
Windows, like
Okay.
Academy Hill,
Yeah.
like this window, this window, this one, you know, they pick sides, and Legion picked a side, and
okay.
so just sort of think of that
Macy
out.
Warehouse.
Well, we can go
Yeah,
back
Mason
to Mark's
Warehouse.
and ask him for
Yep.
his recommendation. I
Yep.
mean, he has done the
Yeah.
whole assessment and everything.
Well, I just want to bring it back to this, Dawn's remark about, or observation, that it sounds as though these windows are not appropriate, that you have to, so can you,
No, they think they're hurricane rated.
oh, they are?
Yeah, they think
They
they
are,
are,
excuse me.
yeah.
They're
I
good.
just wasn't sure because Linda
Okay.
had said 400 series, and I had just gotten a quote that I had to go to A series, but
Yeah,
I
the
think
A
they
series.
are A series. so.
But you're gonna need that anyway for that side.
Are there any other questions that anyone has with respect to our applicant? Are you clear with respect to what we're looking forward to receiving from
I may
you?
have to give you one more phone call just to get clarification, but I think we'll work with this, to come up with.
I gave
Really
you housing
appreciate the
authority narrative.
opportunity to request funds at all and really appreciate that
Yeah.
you took the time to go through this. apologies for not,
No, no,
Reaching
there are no apologies. This is a complicated formula, that, as you can see, we have to struggle
Of
with.
course.
Last year, we had to get opinion from town council to make sure that what we wanted to do, we could do.
right.
So the object of the exercise is for us to try and figure out a way to do it if this is a community need, as opposed to being a blocker that says you can't do it.
Right, right.
So that's the mindset where we're coming from. And so what we're trying to do is to be able to help
Facilitate,
you,
right.
be able to allow us to make a determination that we can help you.
Well, we do appreciate all of that help, and clearly, we'll put it to good use. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
look forward to seeing you again.
Okay,
I'm just gonna go to the restroom.
we have a 15-minute break, so there's a restroom here.
They should be almost up,
Yeah.
it's 10:14.
It's just down the hall.
Well, yeah, they're coming 10:30.
Oh, okay, oh.
Have a few minutes?
Yeah.
Am I the only one in the room that is absolutely gobsmacked? But, you know,
It's government.
but it's so.
Fiasco.
but
It's
it's so
government.
And
Forget,
before,
don't
Can
be
I-
surprised if.
can I remind you too that we're not really recessed at this point, and this, so be careful about your deliberations, especially with a number of us being here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Should we recess for 15 minutes?
Sure.
Are we comfortable recessing for 15 minutes?
Yeah, we just can't, still can't have the
So
conversation.
you can't
I
have
don't
a
know how it
conversation, but at
shuts
least.
off. So they'll just watch us sit here for 15 minutes. So what got you up and out this early in the morning? That's early for you.
To do this.
What time do you have to start getting ready?
Well, Diane didn't, I was up at 5, but I fell back asleep again. And it takes just a little bit for my knees.
Yeah, I feel like I'm walking on posts when I get out of bed. I have to be very careful walking when I first get
Yeah,
up, because nothing moves.
and last night was late. I have 3 different meetings today.
What's the meetings today? Oh,
1 o'clock
Thursday.
HTC, 3:30 I have to go to the dentist. And see her.
Speaking of which, I'm gonna call the dentist, change my appointment tomorrow.
I've got to remember to call.
I think you're missing one, and I have an extra copy. Cause you're supposed to have 3 more, and there's only 2 here. It is.
Mine, oh no, we're not doing mine today.
I had to get a new flip phone, and I hate it.
So we did,
I heard something
we
about
did
that.
this one, we did that
There's
one,
3.
so
I
this
hate it.
is, oh
LG
wait,
doesn't make that same phone in the updated version.
Oh, geez,
And that's
surprise,
the thing,
surprise.
surprise,
No,
surprise,
no,
and the
this is
3G.
Oh, Chad went out.
yeah, that's
This
what
is
we
the
had.
You
only
need to just
service.
We
She
didn't
didn't
bring
bring
Housing
it.
Nantucket, which, that's good, because we don't need it today. Housing Nantucket is not until the
It,
15th.
tell me, as far as I know, we've got to North Carolina
Okay,
on the 20th.
okay,
So I'm not going to be here on the 22nd. It's the full review on the 22nd. Can I give a written report of how, well, I'll talk to you about it. It's just,
sure.
I can't change that date going down there.
Hi, what's going on?
We can also conference you in,
Oh, yeah.
On the telephone?
yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, were you able to
Well,
get a
I'll have-
quote together for them? Joe.
Oh, by the 22nd, maybe we will even be there.
Okay.
We have to, takes a day and a half to
Oh, okay.
drive
Okay,
down.
sure,
Okay.
We don't fly.
okay.
They're in
So,
Arizona.
All right, but,
So, yeah.
in regards to what we had talked about.
Yes.
It's like JP
Yes.
McCallum.
Spent an hour and 2 hours with him, and I'll call you.
yes,
Yes.
sounds good. So we have the Housing Authority next, and then the Macy Warehouse will follow that, and then the Hatman House is
Okay.
last. So, this,
Do you want to, okay.
and
You
Now we
should-
can go
I can
away.
look it up. I'm just at a meeting right now.
Put it in my thing?
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
these two.
Yeah, that's right.
How did the flip shop?
Should be.
So they were good.
They were good,
They were
they didn't
good.
ask for very much,
Yes.
I was so,
Yep.
I thought they would, I kept telling them, come back, come
I
back,
know,
come back.
yeah.
What did they need it for?
Yes, but the
Windows and gutters and stuff like that, so, you know, just
Yeah.
because it's
Everything's on the
continuing to leak,
outside.
everything's leaking,
Yeah.
inside, is what they're leaking, and they're getting as much volunteer help as they can.
I don't know what they still do, cause I'm not out
I
that
mean,
much.
they haven't
But
even
doesn't
done a
the
design yet, so I would say probably 3 to 4
Landmark
months.
House, didn't, they
And they're
used to
gonna
have a
drain
fair,
the
do you remember?
houses and close them up for the winter.
No, it was
They're
the
not
old Island Home
popular.
that had the fair. Landmark never had the fair, unless it was like decades ago. I think they did something on the front
Yeah.
yard.
In
That's
the
been-
front yard, don't you remember they
that's
had
been like
flowers
20
and,
some odd years ago.
well,
Yeah, no.
maybe they could,
I think they might be leaving.
The clientele was.
Anyway, they're very
The
basic.
people that did it at the Island Home, even the Island Home stopped doing it.
Okay.
Because it was so much man
Alright,
hours,
sounds
they
good.
just don't have that kind of time.
right, I can't remember who the committee was, but they did do it up at least,
Well, they did it around the time that they were building the grocery wing, and that was, it took a lot of outside people to do it. They do have a fairly sizable landmark board. I forget who, I think the council, I forget what the board is. I know there's some
It's
crossover between us at the council. What is today's date?
it's the fourth.
Oh, I did miss a meeting yesterday. Okay.
How late did you stay last night?
Oh my God. 8:30.
I was freezing to death.
Oh, I was warm in
I
the
was
front
warm down
there.
front.
Well, it wasn't so warm up, we were way up, not way up and back, but the major cut through. And I must have been sitting under a AC unit,
Oh,
but we were all there. We left at, I don't know, what, 7:45.
that was almost 8:30
Yeah,
between you, we didn't get out really until 8:30.
I mean, really, the last 15 minutes were figuring out the schedule.
I thought that
I-
man about the driving, the traffic. I just don't see how they can come up with, if they have as many units as they're going to do, that amount of traffic isn't gonna make any difference.
Minty.
Because the intersection's already so.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what we're dealing with all over the island, is that all these traffic consultants are just saying that everything, like, it's already failed, and it's gonna continue to fail worse.
But I'm not sure that that's
And the town
true,
needs to
because
deal with it.
in the last 2 weeks, at between 4 and 5 o'clock, Diane and I have been at Five Corners, the high school, in that area. One day, there wasn't anybody there. We went by Hope, the laundry, came down, there wasn't a car in sight. It's basically.
But then there's probably a ton of people jammed up on Lakeland South at that time.
Well, here's my problem with the Rotaries, I'm not a Rotary fan. But here's my
not
problem with the
either.
Rotaries, it's gonna hurry up and make people get to our intersection faster. Instead of delaying it getting there because they're delayed coming off of Old South, or they're delayed coming down Surfside, coming back from the beach, whichever. And so it sort of moves itself through those four-way stop. We'd never get out if it wasn't a four-way
Diane,
stop.
I had one
But
question.
when you start hurrying up people to get to that intersection, nobody's gonna get out of it. It's gonna make that
you said
intersection
about
worse to have a Rotary at Fairgrounds
the
and a
housing,
Rotary at Parkway, because they're gonna come off
ACC
right
has
to
not
us and get
approved,
stopped by a stop
That's what I
sign.
thought.
or even
No, I
seen.
disagree.
Yeah,
Traffic
because
moving at
not
this point.
everyone is
You
going to the
frustrate-
same place.
What's
If you're coming down
process? Do they
Fairgrounds, you're
come
coming
to you
down.
Frustrating people like
afterwards,
me
or
who
how?
stop so many
If
times.
you're going to
Just
Surfside, you're
come
coming down
first and
our
say,
area.
Oh,
these
there needs to
houses-
be another roundabout at South
They
Shore.
have designed these
No.
houses,
Yeah,
Absolutely not.
that's
The
what the
four
traffic consultant said last
I don't
night.
give a damn what. they
bays
say.
and
But why not?
and
I
the
think they're
gables,
safer.
and they have never,
They,
They're
everyone's
not
in the
safe for
road.
pedestrians and bikes.
I have
I'll tell you
been
right
at
now.
every
I'm
freaking
not
meeting.
gonna,
How
I
is
was
that
gonna lie down in the middle of
How
that
are they allowed
intersection.
to-
because they're not required to
I
even
think they're
come to
safer
the,
because you're,
any
you're
of us.
looking the same direction
because of
instead of looking
40B.
in 5 different directions.
Pedestrians have a very difficult time crossing. because
And he
nobody's
thinks
stopping.
he's just being
The only reason the
wonderful.
airport
I
won't
have
work
very
is
little.
because there's a stop sign.
Oh,
over
come
here
on.
He's,
And a stop sign over
Molly,
there.
in the swimming
That's it.
pool, I'm like,
There's
what,
only
you're
one stop.
pandering to
It's
us?
coming
Come
off from
on.
the stop
You're
sign.
not building this
You're
house.
coming in, but you're coming.
No,
No, he's not.
From the airport.
He has
Stop sign.
a bunch of
So much
backers
traffic. I don't want a
that
Rotary
have
at South Shore.
contributed
Nobody in South Shore wants a rotary.
invested in it.
That four-way stop
And
sign
or
was
maybe
just-
there may need to be like a turning time or
something?
I thought about
and
that, but that's gonna
they
cause
have
an
to be
accident. because people
repaid.
coming across.
He
Yes.
is
How
not,
much
he
heavy
doesn't
traffic.
give a diddly
Because
shit.
unlike a lot of
What
places,
he's
we have
trying
two
to do
bike
is
paths.
keep his
The other
investors
one coming from
happy.
Fairgrounds and
He's
the one that's the
projected to
heaviest
make between
going to
30 and
Southside.
$50 million.
I don't want a rotary there. I don't need to
But
get out
you
that
tell
fast.
me, and I can't get an answer.
And when I'm
why
coming down Fairgrounds to go home
the
at like 4 or 5 o'clock, I wait like maybe 3
Conservation
minutes, that's it.
did
The
not
longest I
buy-
wait is when I get stuck
Why
behind the
did not the
NRTA
land
van,
bank buy
sitting there
that
waiting to
property?
unload. So, no, I am not
It
in
was
favor of
offered to
anything.
them at $4 million. They paid
Why
$9
didn't
million
the land bank buy
for
it?
Fat Lady's
By
Beach,
what?
Yeah.
which belonged to Bartlett. Bartlett wouldn't have sold
Right.
the thing, so why
wouldn't
did they
sell
not
it.
buy that piece of
Wait,
property?
wait, there's a lot you guys don't know.
Shenanigans.
There's not so
The
much I
land
don't
bank was, we all got together, a proposal was made,
know. But who's we?
there's a group of people and the land bank. And the motion, that we advanced before they bought it in that September. A offer was made in that summer, and the owners decided they didn't want to work with anybody else. They were going in a different, we were told, quote unquote, a
How's
different
Concom,
direction.
by the way?
That's the end of it. So we tried.
The land bank tried, why don't
We've
they
all
answer? I don't, I don't.
Definitely.
I think we tried very hard.
Are you guys having fun yet?
I grabbed the wrong thing.
Yeah,
Or just
and
look
we'll
at
give
it.
it to you, and they,
Like, I won't
All
rush it,
kinds of
usually I write my
conventions
notes.
stuff going on.
I know
yes.
the family, I grew up with them months later.
Oh, okay.
Kids.
Oh,
And I
yeah,
knew
the
Barbara,
photo.
because she was friends
I-
with my
oh,
grandma.
I
There's a lot of
actually-
moving
I-
parts.
Why would
They
you not
just
want to
wanted
do
to-
it?
She died,
And then, of course, the
But
next
the
piece.
kids had control.
But the
And they
farmer
just
guy
wanted,
I
met
don't
me.
think any of us
Yeah,
really
fine,
know
they
that
liked the
that's gonna
proposal that
affect
was
the
given to
gun.
them, and they didn't want to change it, so.
The
they
like
sent it
town
to
meeting.
them.
Black
There's
Yeah.
nothing the land
raspberry
bank
that
could have
was
done,
good.
because the money was on the
They were
table.
really-
I mean, it doesn't,
on the table.
it doesn't have any
They won't
impact on
take
your
their
Different
review.
direction, and that was.
You
one
guys
of
have
the-
put
I
that
don't understand what different
will
directions.
follow the same
direction
process
is
where
right.
we'll
Right.
negotiate
I don't
terms
care.
of
They
license
like
and
the
make
garden.
sense, and then we'll take it to
Right.
town meeting.
Right.
What the hell
But Barbara
they were
wanted,
saying.
Barbara wanted
You
to
know,
put in
And they
conservation.
had
Play
the
out
soul,
how she
oh,
wants
dump
that.
into the
She
soul.
One of the
didn't
into
elephants in the
the
room
Because
is
it was not a
that,
subdivision.
I think I can say this, you know,
Well, she
But it's
should have
this-
done it when she was
She
didn't wanna
alive.
do it.
A hurricane
is where
would
they
have
would
developed
get.
and
mile an hour
I don't
thing.
That would
They run
actually.
the
mimic
solar
I don't-
panel,
what-
they
out of the
keep
I don't
box,
think
water
that's
because
true.
I was
So
down
I
there
guess
with
the kids
taking
want
samples.
into the
It's
table,
nowhere
didn't
near
want to.
and they're
what
gonna
she calls
grow
fluff
a
anymore.
stuff
30 or
there.
40
We've
years
talked
into
about that a
conservation.
lot, and that would be a
It's
huge point of
fascinating.
And the
negotiation
kids
during
weren't going down
licensing
that
That
path.
stuff.
about how that's gonna be
And the
handled.
kids didn't
Or
want to
if
do
it's
it.
sustainable.
Right.
There's like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
many things
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
They asked $4 million.
Right.
The land bank supposedly came
So I
up with
think
$4 million.
that's gonna be
Well,
our
not just
next
land bank,
meeting,
it
is
was
gonna be
now I'm
focused on
kinda like,
that,
yeah.
so.
I don't know how
And
that
they
project is
didn't want to
gonna
accept the, they didn't want to do it, they were already talking
There's
to.
another big
We
piece of
never moved
property
that.
And
that
they were
has
satisfied
Putting
with the
barges,
group, and that was, they
short
didn't want any
ships
complications, and that was
offshore
it.
Listen,
But they didn't want any.
Creative
An
is
artificial
Right.
reef.
That's
Oh,
what my
yeah.
husband keeps saying, he said, we should just
Yeah.
sink some stuff
They
out
work
there.
all over the
then there's
world.
gonna be
Doug's
like
in
another
Maine.
17
So
acres.
That
we
makes
do
them out
have-
of the coastal resilient
Right,
thing.
you have Bartlett, you have the solar, you have Seti, agriculture, you have them,
Maybe 20 years ago.
so
We
it
can
might be
do
that
it in
corner
Starship,
area.
and it.
So their
and it
attachment
creates-
is
creates
here.
the
They
artificial
don't
reef.
really
In fact, it
know.
improves.
But if you
fishing,
sell
barge,
land,
sell
sell
all
land,
the
you don't care
equipment,
what's happening.
and it finally
Well,
stops,
they
or
were already
releases,
system
and puts the
anyway.
brakes on the erosion.
So
Yeah.
attempts had been
And
made.
it doesn't actually have to be
So we'll-
vessels.
And then another
It's
vote.
And I
very
love
simple.
Amy.
It was
Amy's
advanced
really-
adoption.
It's like
All
night
of
and day.
it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
do- I'm gonna show
And,
you.
And I don't understand why we
A
haven't.
little fraction, Amy's
Some
like.
people have even, in fact, offered to fund.
Those of us who
things,
live
cost
there are
us
the ones that are
that
directly
tested
impacted.
stuff like
Come
that.
on.
In
And
the,
it's just never
I
gotten-
don't know
gotten
what
anywhere,
part of
gotten
town
off the
government
ground.
it is, but it's as Article 66.
I mean, I'm hoping that
That
is
was
addressed
passed
in the coastal
in
resiliency plan to
2002
really start the
Right.
town
discussion
meeting
about
that
that might
said
be an appropriate
Yeah.
measure.
that the
And,
town is,
but I don't understand
is-
what adverse impacts
res-
it might have. or
is
who's
to
going to-
support
this is the-
My
non-invasive
understanding is there
Yes.
really are
Yep.
none,
of
but,
untouched
but,
land.
That's not that's not
I mean, I
binding,
hope
that
in
was
the
a sense of the
resiliency
meeting.
plan, they start to.
It
The
didn't
town
say
could
that,
buy
it said
that.
Article 66B,
forward.
you want to know the
From my point of
specific.
view, and I
didn't
mentioned
say
it
it
to
was
Matt,
the-
who finally, I think, mentioned
They
it in
can't
public.
tell
The only
the
thing that's
town, they
worthwhile
have to
is
buy
a
open
duck-style
land, they
case.
can't do that, it's
And,
illegal.
you know,
But
and
the
as
town
soon as
can't
they put
tell,
money into
They can't tell
these
them to sell it to the town,
exploring that,
absolutely not.
the
better.
No, they weren't
So-
saying sell
Well,
it to
they're
anybody,
talking
they
about
said it
doing
couldn't
some
be
kind of a
developed.
breakwater
No,
off the town
they
pier
cannot
to
put that
protect it in its
designation
new
on it.
plan.
Privately
Because
held parcel.
that's why we're moved to take no action
They
on the
can
funding
take,
for that,
they can,
because
if
we're
they
going
buy it,
back,
the town takes control of
remodeling
something,
the whole
town
thing
can put that
to do it
designation
it's
on
gonna
it, and
be
you have to go to
taken
the state
in for the winter
legislature.
this year.
Yeah.
And
Well,
go
I
back
want
out
to
in
see
the
what-
spring as
I
is,
don't know
and
what-
completely rebuilt
Is
next
this
year.
Sure,
your
how
question?
it comes in,
In a
but it-
way
it
that
doesn't
will
come in at all.
Right.
truly
Right.
last.
Right.
On the privately
That
held
makes sense.
property. You can't do that.
Okay,
Legal
Where-
designation.
I would like to
has be made.
reconvene the meeting that we
You can't do that to
recessed.
private property.
We have our next applicant, the Nantucket Housing Authority. You've been here before. We have allocated a half hour for this particular request. We'd ask you to take 5 or 10 minutes to, in fact, flush out your request, and then we'll open it up to the questions from the floor. This is being recorded and videotaped.
Great, good morning, everyone. Yeah, this is a bit of a repeat, times 2 of last year. You granted the Housing Authority monies to preserve the building envelope of 4A, 4B My Comet Road. That project is in the works, to give you a little bit of an update. Because we as a public entity, a housing authority, things have to go out to bid. So the architect, the way you work with DHCD, is Department of Housing and Community Development, is you have to use their qualified, pre-approved architects. And the one we've typically used here retired. So we now have a new house doctor and one who is very familiar with Nantucket and is getting our project underway. In fact, they are here doing work for the Coast Guard, the Loran Station. So that's a real comfort to me moving forward on last year's proposal, because it's hard to get bidders, to bid on work out here, because their companies aren't here, they don't have housing for their staff, and you know the whole story. But the new architect is well equipped to handle that and make sure, because the last time we had a project that went out to bid, we had to reject all the bids because they came in too high. Not for this project, for prior. So I just want to let you know, last year's project is in a good place. Bid documents are being prepared, and it will be advertised shortly. We're looking at a schedule, because of the time of year, of starting in late spring as far as doing that rehab work, because we're talking exterior, it's windows, roofing, so forth. Getting to this year's application, it's the same thing. But because of the length of time and the complications of getting a general contractor and having to put things out to bid and advertise in the Central Register, I thought I would try to do 2 buildings. Because 2 buildings is certainly more attractive to get bidders here, because it's a bigger project. So that's basically what it is. So we're looking at buildings 2A, 2B, and 6A, 6B My Comet Road. This are 2 more buildings again that are on My Comet Road, which should also help to improve our public image, because they're more highly visible units. As far as what the community sees of our dwelling units. And also, I've already used state funds to do new roofing and some painting exterior improvements along Benjamin Drive. So the buildings that have sort of been neglected are our My Comet Road units, and that's why I've included them in this application. I gave you a lot of photography there. You can see we have birds living in the trim. We have shingles that look like potato chips. We could use a real facelift. And the units themselves are still very tight, very good quality. They were built in 1988, but they're solid. They're solid and they're dry. But the exteriors have seen, they've survived as long as they could. Every material on the structures have technically expired. They were built in 1988. So that's pretty much it. Not much to conclude, except, we also have, it's a good time of year, or a good time to be coming before you, because we could never address even the requests of our tenants, can I have a screen? Can I get a new storm? And these windows are so old that you can't, they're discontinued. And you can't get these. So you'd say, well, what did you do with the screen frame? And it would be lost. So you can't fix the screen because there's no frame. But now Anderson has finally seen this complication for a lot of housing authorities, so they come up with a conversion kit, which we've already used in one of these apartments that was lowered the bid amount that we're going to need, or the construction rehab amount. And you just kind of pop out these old windows and you pop in these new, and they're all 400 series, which the town likes. They're all energy efficient, new screens, don't have to deal with storms. So we've already experimented in there. It's a real cost-effective way, a time-saving way to salvage these windows. We're not having to literally take the framing out and so forth of windows. All that framing stays intact. That's pretty much it. Ready for questions?
I'm just curious, your new architect
Is about that. Is Edward Rouse, R-O-W-S-E Architects, and they maintain an office in East Providence, Rhode Island, and also here in Foxborough, Massachusetts.
We have to.
And like I said, they like coming to the island, and they work for the Coast Guard as well.
Dawn,
Only request is if you can just split the dollar figure into two in case we can only cut one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, I just want to say, I hope that doesn't happen
I know,
because
more
of
efficient.
the whole bidding process, and I thought, that's why I doubled it up, because of the length of time and the cost of we're saving money by combining the two, because the architect's fee is then combined into one, and it's, the advertising only has to be done once, not twice, and that it becomes very costly.
Understood, and I hope we can fund it all, but
Me too.
Linda, then Barry.
We, because we're an entity of the state and the feds and the town, we have to go to prevailing wage. Everything has to be bid. The bid packages have to be prepared by somebody DHCD likes. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So it does take quite a while. We've talked about these buildings for a while and the rehab on them, and just the, as Renee said, the bidding, the having to find the person to review the bid packages before they go out. They have to go to central register, have to do this, have to do that. It's a nightmare. But we have an extra layer of regulations we have to meet because we are an arm of the official entities as opposed to a 501c3. It's ridiculous, but we have to do it.
Barry.
I was just gonna say, it would be good to compose that into a letter as well too, and talk about why you want to try to get both these done at the same time, and put those reasons together for us. We'd need that by the 18th. But sometimes that level of documentation and writing can be a big help to when the committee's finally doing its formulation. I mean, we've got over $5 million worth of requests. And if we are able to achieve maybe 2, that will be amazing. It's probably going to be less than that. So, when it comes to crunch time, we really, there's a lot of talking back and forth as to why we do certain things certain ways.
Mhm.
So I think that would just be helpful for the people, especially for the people who aren't here too, to begin to understand that.
And talk about the rural development restrictions.
Well, it's a bit,
and
you
maintenance
You try to get the
restrictions.
best bang for your buck too, and for $175 to preserve 4 apartments is pretty good.
I won't
Pretty good numbers.
I won't disagree with you at all, but I think you kept it short and sweet, which you gave some really good reasons as to why it's better to do the whole thing at once, as you said. So I'd probably keep it on that level. At least that's my thought to you.
The limitations on what we asked the Landmark House, limitations on how we get funding, where we can get funding, that we can't spend over funding. They were dealing with rural development also, where they had to set apart a budget every year for fixing the building, and the restrictions we have.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a little different though. The state is much more of a stickler than the federal program as far as I'm able to do all kinds of rehab without this whole bidding process with the federal program because we're working quite from, the ability of having an actual reserve account that we're able to maintain. So I got money in the bank for my federal programs, and we're able to take care of things over there, you know, replacing heating systems, new roofing. We've been replacing rotted trim and so forth, and I'm not coming to you for any of that because it's a whole different, better business plan, the federal program than the state. The state business plan is designed to fail. That's what I can say.
And we're
It's not
solvent,
really tough.
unlike other housing authorities, we're solvent.
So, what type of federal programs are those? What are the
It's called,
acronyms?
it was formerly Farmers Home, but it's now USDA Rural Development. And so when we speak of the housing authority, we're running two separate businesses there where the monies aren't even allowed to merge. You know, it's just two budgets, two, you know, everything. It's two distinctly separate businesses.
You get paid by both.
I get paid. Yeah, I get a federal hat, I got a state hat. So.
Can you be a little bit more specific with respect to the areas that you identified and tie them into the prevention of injury, harm, or destruction? You know, we have to make the determination that this funding is specifically required in order to prevent the structure from suffering future injury, harm, or destruction. Those three key words are a determination that we have to make in order to be able to provide this funding, because this housing was originally created not from CPA funding. And so for us to be able to, in fact, make an award, we have to make a determination that the things that are included in your budget are identified to prevent those three things: future injury, harm, or destruction. And to the extent that your letter is a bit more specific with respect to what those things are that you're doing and how they deal with those three criteria, would be really very helpful for us in making our determination.
Well, the big key is their rental housing. And, you know, so you have tenants that are, you know, occupying them that are, you know, at low income that aren't able to address certain things right off the bat when they see them. Sometimes, and I always tell them, I said, well, make sure you tell me if you see the wind blowing through your window.
Wait, just Renee, before you go, it's not injury, harm, or destruction to the tenants. It's injury, harm, or destruction to the building.
Well, I was getting to that.
Okay.
Of course, they're really old buildings. They're built in 1988. And when you start losing the building envelope from, you know, with water seeping in through windows or leaky roofs and that sort of thing, not only causes the rot of the bones of the building, but I will throw the tenants in about harm, because when you have water leaking into buildings, you get black mold.
No,
That's a significant health hazard. That we're not there, but we don't want to get there.
Yeah, but that's the kind of help to us in terms of indicating that we come within the criteria that we have to be within, the determination we have to make in order to be able to prove the funding.
Okay.
So just put another narrative.
So give me your
It's the words that you used in the project information, project goal and scope.
Yep.
About halfway through the middle of the paragraph, and it says that it protects the housing structure from future injury, harm, or destruction.
Okay.
Those three words are critical for us to make a determination that this funding is being used to meet those three criteria. Otherwise, we cannot fund you from the CPC.
Gotcha.
Just be more specific.
So, did I understand you correctly that you were allowed to spend as much as you pleased on maintenance as far as the USDA rural development?
No, no, because, you know, quite frankly, we have, in reserve for that program, we have like $160,000. So we have to use that, you know, intelligently, and while maintaining a certain significant amount in case of major emergencies. But again, it's a program where the state has a different way of doing capital improvement plans, and then my federal, I have a 10-year plan that I update every 10 years, or a 20-year plan that I update every 10 years, and we just completed that capital improvement plan. So we just identify with the monies you have, you break it out in the 20 years when you can spend and start, you know, replacing things. So, for example, I have, out of the 19 apartments federal, we have like 6 more apartments to update the heating system, so, and I can call those shots. Versus the state, I don't get to call those shots, you know, it's really difficult to get them to approve what I think is a priority and what they think is a priority. So it's just it's a different business plan altogether. But no, I don't get to spend what I want, we get to spend what we have within reason, and while maintaining a certain balance in that reserve account in the event of emergencies. Like we had a water line break, that, you know, we're in the water company here, and you know what it costs when those lines break and you don't know where the break is, and, you know, so in cases like that, you always want to have some money that's put aside to handle something that's like a notice $5,000 expense that you didn't budget for.
Maria?
Donovan.
So I guess, because we had this discussion with the previous applicant, the Landmark House, and so I don't fully understand. So I'm just asking questions to try and flesh out my own understandings on how the feds allow you to allocate budgets for maintenance. So you have to guesstimate what your maintenance budget is going to be every year, and then you get, or the feds allow you to spend a certain percentage of that, or?
Yeah, every year, not only do you have a budget you prepare for general operating, anticipating, you know, you might have 2 department turnovers, or just general wear and tear that needs to be attended to, plumbing issues, electrical issues, grounds issues. So you come up with a budget that you're happy with, of these recurring that you know are going to be expenses to maintain your buildings. Also annually, as part of the budgeting process, you have to do an annual capital improvements budget. And sometimes you don't spend all those things, but you're identifying things. And then before you even spend those dollars, let's say if I identified that, you know, I might have 2 refrigerators and 2 ranges that I have to replace in a year. That's actually a bad example, because usually we replace them because of an emergency. But I want to paint the exterior of at least 2 buildings per year. Before I can go out and paint those 2 buildings, you identify them, you get quotes, you get 3 quotes, you're staying under a certain, you know, again, threshold to get that work done. And then they have to approve it, then you can get the work done. Then you've got to submit the check for them to sign to reimburse you for what you spent. It's an entirely different process than the state puts me in.
And so have you found that when you submit these quotes to the USDA Rural Development, that they don't challenge them as being too expensive, that they?
Not if you're supplying them with proper documentation that you shopped it out, that you got 3 bids and you're selecting the lowest bidder. And quotes in that particular case, it's not a bidding process, but it's quotes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Landmark, I don't want to, you know, I don't know how they handle their annual budget. I just explained to you what I do.
Right.
So
No, I
people,
understand.
different managers, different styles.
Right. Right.
Any other questions?
Rick, can you give me that date that you need this letter by?
October 18th.
Pardon me?
October 18th.
Oh, right. I tell you all my other deadlines. October 18th. I will do something. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dan.
How are you? I don't know if you know it, but Tim Golden, Timmy
Yeah.
Golden, in the hospital.
Oh, yeah. Well, he wasn't our.
No,
Housing Nantucket.
How's the Nantucket?
Yeah.
Okay. That,
But I don't really know him.
oh.
All right, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
With respect to, Barry?
Yes, sir.
With respect to the next two items, I want to disclose that I sit on the Properties Committee, but I am no longer a trustee of the NHA, and I have able to make a recommendation through the Properties Committee, but I am not a voting trustee or a member of the NHA.
So you're clear on that, you can sit on that?
Yes.
Okay. That's different than St. Paul.
Yes.
Where'd you get the water? Where'd you get the water?
In the kitchen.
There you go. It is, isn't it? You want me to lend you my vest, my folder, specifically, because it's that time of year. when You don't know what the air conditioner is gonna do to you.
It's too cold.
Not over here. You go to the bed. You don't have a bed.
If anybody gets too warm, just let me know.
Okay.
You're okay?
Yeah.
So you're still in the summer costume there, Ben?
What's that?
The summer wear. but-
Oh, God, yeah, no, that'll be, no, I don't have shorts on today.
I said short sleeve shirt.
Oh, short sleeve shirt, I'm sorry.
It was a beautiful
It's
day
gonna be a
out
high of
today.
68 today.
Yeah,
Is it?
so it'll be nice
And they
out.
said maybe up to 72. But-
Alexa told me it was a high of 68 this morning.
Yep, we're ready to go.
Should we wait for Linda?
Where'd you go in the restroom?
I think so.
Good morning.
Good morning. Here's the firing squad. Good to see you all.
Wow. The firing squad, wow.
Sit anywhere?
Yes, please.
Somebody give them the blindfold.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We got one more chair.
If there is.
Here, I'll pick it up.
We have until noon time to consider your two applications.
Sorry.
There, I got it. Fantastic.
So, you've been here before. What we would like you to do is to sort of split them in two, do the presentation first with either with the Macy Warehouse or Hadwin House, whichever you want. Take about 10 minutes to just sort of flush out the preservation and then open it up to us for questions with respect to that project. And then do the same thing with respect to the other project.
Great. Okay, super. can we start with,
First of all, this is recorded, and if you would introduce yourself and the members of your party, and if, I think you know all of the members of the committee, but if you're not,
great, so James Russell, Executive Director of the NHA, and
Good morning, Johanna Richard, the CFO.
Hugh Lloyd Thomas, Grant Manager.
Edwin Rudd, Director of Facilities. Doug Seaholm, Facilities Department Project Manager.
welcome.
great. Well, thanks, Ken. So first of all, thanks very much for the support last year. We're very grateful for that. We've got some good news. We've made some good progress in terms of trying to match those fundings, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about a decision that the board has made, which I think you'll be pleased to hear. I want to talk about our use for the Thomas Macy warehouse and why I think it's going to be important for the community and fit the goals of CPC. We want to talk about the interior plans for Thomas Macy and how we expect that to fit in the overall context of what we're doing as an organization. And so we can take any of these in order, but why don't we start with kind of where we are. First of all, really appreciate the $150,000 award last year. That's allowing us to move forward with the slate, which is just slightly less than that, and Ed has got a very robust scope of work. We feel pretty good about the way we're spending that money. Doug is project manager. We've appointed Doug project manager on this, and then Doug reports up to Ed. We've also retained Bob Miklos, architect, who's doing a lot of work for us pro bono to make sure that we move forward with this project, and we do so in a sensible manner. We've received $50,000, which is a relatively small amount from Mass Historic Commission. We wish it were a lot more. But what's interesting about the Mass Historic Commission is that it does require competitive bidding on some of the scope of work, but also, and perhaps more importantly, it forces us to think very carefully about what we're doing and when we're doing it. And as a result of that, we're going to have a general contractor on board. Scott Anderson has agreed to be general contractor. So I feel like the back of house team with general contractor, with Scott, with Doug as project manager, with Ed overseeing this, with Bob Miklos, that we can take this really important building and successfully fulfill what we want to do with the exterior and also give us some good input in the interior. Okay, point number one. Point number two, we were surprised, as were many, with what happened last January, February, March with the flooding. And so we've engaged Tom McGrath, who's a longtime, now ex-National Park Service gent. And he's been our consultant as we think through what we want to do with Thomas Macy Warehouse. One of the interesting points that he's mentioned to us, kind of a quick takeaway, is that it's going to be prohibitively expensive, nor would we want to do it, and that is to raise up Thomas Macy Warehouse, because water was literally lapping in, and when cars went by, it actually came through the doors in the front, according to the tenant, with the March storm. So that's given us some concern, and it gives us a question about what we're going to actually use the space for. We're concerned about that, and also you just simply have the hydrostatic pressure because there's no concrete in the basement. Water simply just will find its level. But his recommendation to us was, if indeed as these storms continue with the frequency and velocity, that we should have mechanisms such that if the water comes in, that we quickly allow it to exit. And so I think this is a pretty interesting strategy. So as we go about the interior work on the first floor of Thomas Macy, our plan is to basically have, and it's just common sense, everything off the floor, air conditioning off the floor, electrical off the floor, exhibits off the floor, suspend from the ceiling as much as possible, such that when the water does come in, we're allowed to, it can get out quickly, and it allows for a quick cleanup. In terms of work, we're going to start, we're proceeding in October this month. We start with the slate. We expect that to be complete fairly soon. Then we've got another scope of work starting in the spring, working on the outside with the windows, etc. We're very grateful to the town for putting in the handicapped access. So, I mean, one way to look at that ramp that was installed is that it's the first time that somebody has been able to, if you've got an ambulatory issue, been able to get into Thomas Macy Warehouse on your own volition since 1846. And I think that's a pretty significant statement. I think it looks terrific down there. I certainly think it's helped the flow through as people come off the ferry, all 550,000 or 600,000 or so that walk through there. So I think it's helped, and I know that it's certainly been appreciated by us. And there's a dollar value of about 40,000, 45,000 just on that scope of work. So we appreciate the town's help in that. Now, when I saw you last, the question that you correctly posed to us was, what are we going to do with the space? And we punted on that. We weren't able to give you a crisp description of what we were going to do last year. And since then, the board has made a decision for the NHA to take back Thomas Macy Warehouse. We've already informed our tenants, much to their chagrin, and we're doing what we can to work with Julie on the ground floor because she's going to be most impacted. We may be able to find some workaround solutions for folks on the second floor. We wanted to alert them as quickly as possible. As soon as we sent in the application to you, which is for all intents and purposes a public document, we wanted to alert them that this is our thinking. If things get delayed, well, they get delayed, and there's a way for them to remain there a little longer. But our plan at the moment is to do as much renovation, construction work on the interior starting in late 2019, which would allow us to get occupancy hopefully by Daffodil Day or thereabouts 2020. So that's our goal. So we hope to be able to give the tenants at least a summer in 2019 as a bridge. They may be able to get 80% of their income instead of 100, but at least it's not zero. And so we're very sensitive to their needs. What we would like to do as an organization is we believe that we can move into that space and we can use this historic site in a way which is more strategically significant, certainly fitting our needs in terms of highest and best use. But I think we can introduce the visitor to what's going on in Nantucket. I think that's going to be a better use for that space, and I think people will applaud us for that. So on the ground floor, we're going to have a retail function. We will still keep that, but part of the ambiance in there will be a combination of, it hasn't been determined yet, but some combination of timelines and historic imagery and references to what people are going to expect when they come into town. And then the second floor, we're able to, and also we're very limited in what we can put in there because of the reasons I mentioned earlier regarding the flooding. But then on the second floor, we've devised a pretty interesting plan where we can seal off that space to some degree and start controlling the climate such that we can put in more expansive exhibits in there. And we see those exhibits as being general Nantucket timeline exhibits. If you want to get a sense of what that could look like, the timeline at the museum, which brings people from 1659, which is actually an anniversary next year, 360th, and bringing people up to the present day. We see that as a sort of introductory exhibit that people can get. And in that regard, there have been a couple of things that I would just mention that we've been pretty happy about this year, and I think our peer organizations have appreciated it too, and that is that we've been looking at what is the experience that people have when they come into the Whaling Museum business, into the Whaling Museum lobby, by way of also finding out what else can they do on the island. And we've had information racks in there that the other cultural nonprofits have been able to put their material in. We found that to be helpful. And then I brought these along too because I just think it relates indirectly to making sure that we promote others, but we've got partner sites listed in here, and also there's discounted admission. So I like the way that we're able to use the muscle that the NHA brings to bear in terms of shaping what visitors do on island, working very closely with Janet Schulte at Tourism, working very closely with David Martin at Chamber of Commerce, and also our peers, to try to spread the wealth and make sure that all boats float as a result of the public investment that we get into these spaces. In terms of what we're doing in the interior, we're obviously being, well, we've got a restriction and an easement on it. A historic restriction on it. There is a very interesting winch, which we hope to expose. That'll be a fun element, we think, upstairs. Handicapped access is going to be a key issue. We're now looking at a pump lift inside. Not sure what the exact name of the lift is, but a wheelchair lift so people can get to the second floor. And we think that's a much better solution. It's a less invasive solution than building a structure outside, which is going to do two things. First of all, well, it's going to do a number of things. It's going to jack the price up tremendously, which we're not too excited about. Secondly, it's going to force us to build a new structure outside. But perhaps most importantly of all, the idea of coming in through a window and kind of mucking around with the structural integrity of that old building is something that we would rather not deal with. So we would like to, this is something that we feel is a value that we have at the NHA, to try to make all our properties as much as possible accessible. Now, we can't do it with all our properties. We can't get people to the second floor of the mill, for instance, or the jail is difficult. But let me talk about that when we get onto Hadlin House, because we do plan to go to the Access Board in Boston and ask for a variance on second floor access to Hadlin. I want to talk about that particular issue because I think it could be rather interesting if we're successful in that other organizations might apply the same logic. By way of a dialogue, does that help? Is this so
Just to clear, so the first floor will be retail still?
Yes, so yes, and very simply on that, this is all public knowledge, so we're earning probably about $110,000 or so from the current tenants, all told, and we want to be able to not have that decrease to zero. It was one of the reasons why it took us such a long time to get to the decision for us to move into that space. So in the fall, after we received the first CPC award, what we spent a lot of time working with was looking at other nonprofits, how their gift shops worked. Could we be successful in that location? And we came to the determination that we're not going to put the organization in jeopardy as a result of making this move. Otherwise, we wouldn't be coming to you with this particular proposal. We would simply restrict it to the envelope and say, we've protected the envelope of this and we're not going to move into the inside.
To be clear, the retail you're talking about is a retail that will be run by the NHA as opposed to an independent third party.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for the clarification. Yes, we run the retail. So that is, again, sending out our message. We start controlling that.
It's like the Whaling Museum shop.
Like the Whaling Museum
So it's a museum gift shop, it's not an out tenant?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Yeah, yeah. So for the moment, although the product mix may be slightly different, that hasn't been determined. Yes.
Well, with 600,000 people walking past your door, that should help.
I hope so. You know, I think, we're, there was an interesting conference that Community Foundation put on the other day, and I can tell you it was very illuminating to see 108 nonprofits represented, and that's a lot of nonprofits on this island, and that's not to mention about another 800 nonprofits that come here during the summer soliciting. So, quite honestly, anything I think we could, if there was one message that came from that, it was if we can collaborate and we can work together closely and support the nonprofits on island, I think that's just a very smart thing for us to do, because we know that a lot of people also want to chip away, and that philanthropic base is something that we try to protect. So, so that's point number one there. I would say the second thing is whatever we can do to help increase our capture rate with those tourists, particularly the psychographics of the people coming off the High Line, I think is a little different from coming off the steamship. We would probably have more people come to us if High Line and steamship were transposed, just I think there's just more day visitors or 2-day visitors coming off High Line. So we had some experiments down there this summer that you may have seen with people in costume trying to direct people to the museum. They were marginally successful. Our attendance is essentially flat over this time last year. Quite honestly, I think that's got a lot more to do with rain days and the lack thereof this year than.
Can you get into the specifics of what your grant proposal is in terms of what you would be doing relative to the Thomas Macy warehouse with the funds you're requesting, and how it fits within our criteria?
Right, yes, so. Thanks. So what's interesting about Thomas Macy is just the sheer extent of work that has to happen in that space. The electricity was put in before Edison was born. You know, the pipes are very old. The plumbing needs upgrading. HVAC. So it's really across the scope. If you look on page 21, thanks. You can see there's a breakdown here of a number of items. Obviously, some demolition that we'll be able to take care of. There's extensive electrical work which must be done. We consider that to be a high priority. Plumbing to upgrade those pipes is necessary, and certainly getting to the bathroom on the second floor, which is proposed. The wheelchair lift, as we previously talked about, is something which is required, we believe essential. HVAC on the second floor to provide some heating during the winter time, both on the first floor and the second floor, and cooling in the summer. We'll need that for artifact protection on the second floor for sure. Fire suppression system, because we're going to have mixed use in there with retail and also exhibit space up there. We're going to have the fire suppression requirement, which we would want to put in. Security and alarm is a rather minor item. Roof installation, just for efficiency reasons. We want to build in a vestibule to create a bit of a curtain. And so you can see that the whole thing dials up to about $650,000. And we thought what would be appropriate to ask of CPC would be to say, okay, well, what are the items which allow us to move forward and are required? The wheelchair lift is something that we feel strongly about. We wouldn't be able to open up, or we would feel badly about opening up the second floor if we didn't have that particular component. And then the fire suppression, because of the mixed use in the space, is something that we would ask funding for.
It doesn't have any fire suppression at the moment?
No, there's fire extinguishers there.
Go ahead.
Linda.
Well, I was just, okay, the wheelchair, the fire system, it's improving the building, or it's upgrading it to what we need, but does it cover historic restoration?
Well, I suppose if it burns to the ground, it would.
Yeah, okay. But what about the wheelchair?
In terms of the reverse.
We're allowed
Are
to
they
do that.
required to?
No, not right now, but we're allowed to fund that.
Linda?
I've had this conversation at the state. We've done it before with some of the other historic things we've worked on in order to have public access. We can do ADA requirements. And in my, I used to work in the second floor of the building when the Artists Association was in there. And it was okay in the summer. Not so much when it got cold. But it didn't, if you're gonna put exhibits in there, because we had a lot of paintings in there, because every piece of the wall on the first and second floors were covered with paintings. There's nothing to stop it from going down. The outside, during the Great Fire, the brick buildings didn't go to the ground because they were brick. But the insides were hurt. You can still see singe marks on some of the older brick buildings if you look behind the walls and up in the attics. But they didn't burn to the ground. And if you're going to put exhibits in there and people on the second floor with a wheelchair lift, et cetera, you're going to need fire suppression to protect the building and protect the exhibits that are in the building and the people on the second floor with that lift. So I think it's probably they have to go hand in hand. You're going to put people on the second floor and you're going to put exhibits in there. You're going to need fire suppression to protect everybody and the items and the building with that increased use as well by the public, hopefully. So I think that works for me. The emergency stairway rebuild, is that on the still dock side?
Yes. Yeah. And so we've been looking at that. For me, my thing is the preservation. So it's probably the hardest thing has been, once we get into the building, is to clear out. I've gone through historic photos and seen from the Art Association, but all the partitions that have been put into the building, which is not a lot. but I'd like to take all the partitions that aren't historical out, just the light wood walls, clean the walls, the floors, clean everything out first before we do anything. Let the building breathe for a week or two, and then start coming in with what we need for the wheelchair lift. And figuring out the space for the wheelchair lift, we took a lot of time figuring out where we would put that in. And basically, we're looking at where the old bathroom is on the second floor. There's a lot of damage on some of those beams, and from all the rain getting into the building from the roof, it makes the most sense to put it there, and it works out very well, because right next to that, we put ADA bathroom there. You're not, you're trying to stay away from second class entry for wheelchair lift. So I think we thought out very well and trying to do minor work changes inside, like not adding a bunch of walls, but keeping the character of the building as the main thing.
Cause I did work on the second floor, it was wide open, they weren't, the partitions weren't there.
Yeah. And that's pretty much how we're trying to keep it.
Just on that, in terms of there's a balance that we have with what we do with the second floor, so we're not planning to bring it up to the same level as a climate controlled space in the museum, which would require vapor barriers and plaster walls. And the reason for not doing that is I think it takes away from the historic character of the building. So that's going to limit to some degree what we can put in there. I don't think we're seeing Eastman Johnson's and pieces of fine art and logbooks going into that. Sorry, works on paper or textiles going into that space. But it doesn't stop us from getting it to 80% of the way in terms of telling a really interesting and robust story. The other point, we talk about it in here, it's a point, I'm not sure how much weight I would put on it, and that is we're hoping to see obviously efficiencies as a result of working on a number of projects simultaneously. So as we talk to our various suppliers, we're hoping that we're going to see some reduction in price. Well, we know that we're going to see some reduction in price if we can do projects simultaneously. Just
Like lift in both buildings.
lift in both buildings, sprinkler systems, air conditioning. We know that we'll start seeing some savings there.
So that's an interesting point, that the difference between just putting a normal air conditioning system in as opposed to putting in vapor barriers and the like makes difference to what you could actually show there, even in a short-term exhibition.
No, not necessarily short-term. Because each material is treated differently. So, metal is going to react differently than paper or textiles. As a matter of fact, curiously enough, canvases are some of the most robust, right? I mean, they exist fine in Venice, and that's a very humid environment for a long time. I think that, the true charm and what we're focused on is the building. I mean, if you look at kind of our mission, it's almost equally balanced in terms of preservation of structure versus collections. I mean, even if you put a dollar value on our collections and on our properties, it's almost equal in terms of what the amounts are, so it's not lopsided. So I believe to be quite careful in that regard. Also, I think we wouldn't necessarily want to get that deep so quickly. The word that we're getting back from retailers is that as you come off the ferry, that you get to the Thomas Macy warehouse very quickly, and so the introduction that people want to have there is, well, just that. It's an introduction to Nantucket history, as opposed to going deep in any particular topic. Let people go to the Whaling Museum for that, or have one else to go for.
Where am I going and what am I going to see?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we're fortunate that the ice cream store is right next to us, because that's the first thing that they go to.
Yes, they are. And the tavern on the way up.
And you'll be serving hardtack, right?
Any other questions with respect to this particular application?
I think one more comment. In the past, when NHA's come in before we started working for them, the various projects we've done, we've always asked what the NHA is putting into a particular project, and I'm glad to see that you broke out that the NHA is putting in a substantial amount of money into this particular project. Because normally, before, we always had to like drag it out of them, what are you gonna put in? But you've given it to us right up front.
I think we can say that there's a number, in the next 2 years, there's a number of about $2 million that we're looking at in terms
Capital.
of capital investments. And that'll, this is slightly, it's related because it should inform your thinking. And there are 4 major projects that we hope will transform how people use the NHA and how we care for our assets. And one is Thomas Macy Warehouse, and the second is Hammond House. And the next 2 we haven't discussed in these proposals, but there's a major investment that we need to make into Bartlett Road, where we're beginning to see mold ruins in the collection. And that could be a number of $250,300,000, and we feel like we just have to address this as quickly as possible. And then the Folger building, which is the building adjacent to the new building, there's now the thinking is for us to at least make publicly accessible about 50–60% of that space. And so this is all, you can see that if this all moves forward expeditiously within the next year or 2 years, that the experience by the public is going to be very, very different. And that's not including the efforts that we're making at the oldest house, talking about the Native American story there, which will be new and exciting this coming summer, and also the efforts that Ed has made at the mill to keep that running. And again, that's a goodwill, and I think that's generated a lot of goodwill as Ed has put a lot of effort into making sure that that's there for public benefit.
Well, when I was a kid, when they built the Folger, they put all of their old photographs in there. There weren't any paintings. And you had to get permission to go in there, and you could go, and they had all the shipwreck, actual photographs, not paintings. They had so many photographs in your collection of old town, old shipwrecks, everybody going out to Wisconsin, to Codsh. I mean, it's the most fascinating. I will never forget looking at those photographs when I was a kid. You can't see those anymore. They're put someplace so they don't disintegrate, but they had them all out on those walls, and it was just one of those casual things, but the general public wasn't wandering through there. So that's the kind of stuff I'd love to see go back there. The photographs are fascinating.
Yeah, by the way, that's something that would exist very well down at Thomas Macy Warehouse too, so that when people come in, they get a sense of the character of the island, and also this is what people are coming to the island to see as well, so we're setting them up.
And shop.
Is there any additional information that the committee wants from the NHA with respect to this particular application? Then let's move on to the next, the Hadwin House.
Okay, well, thanks very much. So this is unusual that we're submitting 2, but the reason why we're submitting 2 is because we want to move post-haste on this. We feel like we've got a very good team in place with Doug and Ed. And if you turn to page 20, we'll be able to see what the numbers look like. Let me put this in strategic context for you. So Hadwin House came into the organization back in the 60s. It was open as an historic house for a period of time. For the better part of 10 years or so, it's been closed except for walking tours. I think it's obvious to anybody that having one of the probably arguably the most wonderful Greek revival home in the island and not allowing people to enter is not using the space for its best use. So what we did in the spring of this year was to invest in an air conditioning system on the ground floor only. We opened up the space to visitors, and we worked with the Artist Association to put on an exhibit out in the garden. And regardless of your taste in sculpture and fine art, it's been a lot of fun and it's been very successful. Our attendance projections show that we're looking at about 8,000 people going through the home by the end of the year. And Johanna and her team are going to be opening Greater Light 99 Million and also Hadwin House for decorated tours during stroll. So
the Friday, of Stroll Weekend. You know, we do our house tour for the Friends of Nantucket Public Schools. We have Greater Light, we have the Hadwin House, we have the 99 Main. It's gonna be really cool, because nobody's been in those for a while.
That's right.
And we just gave you money for Greater Light.
Yeah, and it's great and Greater Light is undergoing a transformation too. We're going to bring that back to its original look and feel, which is pretty cool in terms of the interior. And as far as 99 Main is concerned, which is directly across the street from Hadwin House, that's an important story because next year is Melville's 200th birthday, and that's a very, very important thing for the island to hop on board and own, because it's either owned by Arrowhead, New Bedford, or Nantucket, and we've got to really make sure that we're on that story from a tourist point of view. Melville had dinner at 99 Main, so there'll be an exhibit on the second floor, we hope, of Hadwin House. So we were very pleased and we were very buoyed by what we saw at Hadwin House this year. We had a few events up there, but not many. We had private dinners. We had two very interesting lectures related to the Rights and Race exhibit, which is a whole story that we don't talk about at the Whaling Museum, which we want to go a lot deeper on. As a matter of fact, Boston University students are working on this in a semester-long project as we speak and coming to the island next week, and they're developing that whole exhibit to tell it in a more robust and interesting way. A great story, absolutely super story, particularly as we get ready for suffrage in 2020. So we think these are important themes. But why move on Hadwin House now? So Linda, you alluded to the fact that Thomas Macy was used as a gallery space, and at Hadwin House, there are interns there at the moment, which I'm sure you're aware of. We want to move the interns out of Hadwin House, and so that the only use for that space is pure exhibit space. And then, if that is the case, we can get 9 galleries, hey presto, in that space, which is going to be a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for the island. So I could see, I don't want to make promises on this, but we've had conversations with other nonprofits who are looking for places to exhibit. So have a look at the gesture where we worked with the Arts Association with the sculpture show and just match that with the interior spaces. And you can see how we could use some of these rooms at Hadwin House to allow others to present their work on a rotating basis. Hadwin House is a little simpler than Thomas Macy. Thomas Macy, just the whole thing needs to be gutted, as you saw by the list. But if you look at the work that needs to happen in Hadwin, it's not quite as much, but there are a couple of key areas. Now, our understanding and our read is that we're not required by law to put in the sprinkler system, but we're still putting it into this budget. I just want to explain that because it's a large and really tricky project for us to undertake. Our understanding that if a building is under a certain size and under a certain number of people and it's single use, that we're not required to put in a sprinkler, except for it's the only Greek revival house that we have, and it's made of wood, and the last thing we want to do is for the darn thing to burn down. So we think just simply for acid protection, we want to go ahead with this particular project. We've engaged the head of operations at Yale Peabody's Museum, who's provided us with a lot of really good information for how to put in sprinkler systems into an historic home such that you're not looking at ugly black pipe, but rather you're snaking lines through, particularly between the first and second floor, which is the problematic areas. It's not problematic in the attic, although the attic is absolutely fantastic, and it's not so problematic down in the basement. Now, we're not asking for funds for the attic nor the basement. I think that's just going to have to be a project that we deal with down the line, but obviously we would like to maximize use of the space in due course. Importantly, when it comes to handicapped access, this is our logic, and this is not unassailable, and so I'm delighted to talk about it and get your feedback. But again, we would rather not build a structure on the back of Hadwin House for a variety of reasons, cost being one. So what, in our conversations with Boston Access Board, if we can get people to the first floor such that they can enter the first floor And then we're working on providing an equivalent experience on the first floor for what people see on the second. We think we may be able to satisfy this obligation. So just what does that mean, other than the usual oral histories and written histories? We've engaged a person on the West Coast to help us with augmented reality, such that when you're on the first floor and you can't make it to the second, you're experiencing something which is quite new and different. And then we're using three-dimensional technology, which is Google-based, which allows somebody to literally feel like they're in this room with a sweep using monitors. And it's really effective. It allows you to zoom in on this object, and you can read this text here, you can zoom out, and you can feel like you're there. So in the conversations with Boston Access, just looking at you on this,
You should talk to the JC House, because they're just now putting in a handicapped entrance with going up, and it's very tight building. It's not a, a big project, and it will go from the patio up to the first floor or down, actually, which I don't know how they do, but it goes down to the old tap room, and it's going to go up to the first floor. And you hardly notice it. We approved it just 2 weeks ago. They may have some information that you'd find handy as far as you'd be using something like that or not.
There's a building on Center Street that goes down to where that hairdresser place was, and then it goes up to that floor, and then it's up to that floor. So if you don't go more than 3 floors, you can do it in a screw lift.
Well, this is,
You don't have to get the bell and the whole elevator thing.
that's our understanding.
and it goes inside after you go to the first floor, so then you don't see it. But it's worth at least looking to see what they're doing. It's brandy new.
Where did you say you were gonna put this, if you weren't gonna put it in the back where we talked about?
So our plan,
I was gonna say, the best location we found to not compromise the Hadlin house is on the back side of the house.
Right, on the
Where-
Pleasant Street side.
Pleasant,
You can see it from Pleasant Street, yeah.
you won't see much of it because.
Coming out of the garden, in other words.
Yeah, so it'll be on there's steps that come down the steps facing Pleasant Street. It would be around the corner from that. So it's in a little alcove from where the addition that was put on in the 20s is. There's a set of stairs there, which we don't need to be there. So we can stick it, it'll be back around the corner, just around the corner. It'll bring you up, and then you go in the back door.
It's only needed as a path to travel, obviously, from Pleasant Street into Wood. Or somehow.
Yeah,
You need access to relief to go off the front door, so.
So I have a few observations and a question, which I should have asked last time. So I didn't fully understand in your breakdown here where it says, quote, NHA prep. And what's NHA prep mean?
so that's where we're gonna allocate resources to perform that work. So on page 21, if you look at.
Right, or page 24? Because then it shows on page 24, it shows what you're actually putting in. 296.
Yes, so for instance, so this is.
So that's all part of that 296?
That's all part of the 296, yes. The request to CPC is 278 as part of the 296, which all adds up then to the 574.
Okay. So the 360 system you were talking about? Your future plans for a 360 system?
Oh, yes, for equivalent access, yes.
Yeah. So I happened to be at the Reality Garage in Boulder, Colorado a few months ago, which works on VR presentation. So we put the goggles on and, you can do everything, go around the world, jump off a building, and they actually have a Pioneer system for just aiming to pick up items off shelves or go into a museum and immediately go right up to the painting. And I don't know if whether you might want to have a word with them, as they're pioneers in VR displays. And I was fascinated because, of course, in the museum in particular, you were suddenly right up in the painting at a distance that normally no museum will allow you to get near. And so anyway, I'm just throwing that out there, the Reality Garage in Boulder, Colorado.
Well,
So
Yeah, I've been, our IT people, I've been talking to them because I.
It's a reality
have
garage?
VR for flight sims and so
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the computer, and I have the VR system.
Yeah.
And I was showing them and being like, if there's any way we can do this augmented reality, and they're
Right.
like, look at this is just on a phone. And you basically do a whole virtual reality of the second floor of Hadley. It's almost like VR.
Got you,
It's on
okay.
your phone, it's like,
Right,
that's pretty cool.
right,
And
right.
it's also quite neat, the old building, and you are bringing some of this modern IT technical stuff into it, which sort of complements.
Right, right.
both.
That's, yeah, at a very different level from wearing the goggles. And the computing power for, I guess, for what I was watching was pretty astonishing.
We're gonna go ahead, sorry,
No,
but we're gonna go ahead with this regardless, because when you think of the second floor of the mill that people can't access, when you think of the second floor of the jail, second floor of the oldest house. So,
Well, I mentioned to you the second floor of Mariah Mitchell's thing on Vestal Street, they have a
that's right.
thing down there, that's where we started that conversation, they have that thing downstairs. Cause even if some able-bodied people cannot get up there, so they have that whole little thing, you can see what's up there, and see what they're seeing.
Yeah.
On a remote, so that's the only way to access that second floor, is to do that.
So if we can do that, if we can find a way to do it inexpensively, we know that we've got the capacity in the Novissimos, because they're kind of leading the, Alan Berry and Novissimo, our IT team, they're leading it. So they're exploring this. So this is something that we're gonna do regardless. Think of the mezzanine of the Quaker Meeting House. I mean, there's terrific exhibit space there that we can talk and use that space, but at the moment we're not. So how can we start providing, appropriate equivalent experiences that work, right?
right.
Well, you
The,
did that at the jail
so
though,
I
the
have,
little shed.
Just a little shed.
so, when you were talking about the 9 galleries potential there, surely that isn't single use, so you would have to have the sprinkler system if you did have the galleries in there. Didn't you say that you were?
Well, our read on single use is that it's all museum use. So,
okay.
So as opposed to, at the moment, the reason for moving the interns out of the space is because we're having residential plus museum use. So, at some point, should there be a restaurant in the basement, let's say? I'm just making this up.
Oh, I'm
We have
not
discussed that,
opposed
but
to
that
a
would-
sprinkler system. I think a sprinkler system is common sense.
Uh-huh.
I'm curious as to what it does to the insurance, if it brings the insurance down substantially, or.
It could, I haven't gotten quotes on it, but I'm sure it would.
Yeah, but no, I'm absolutely all for putting a sprinkler system in.
No mini split on the outside of the building, right?
Oh, no.
Yep.
You've been really contact with.
Oh,
No minis.
one thing that having a fire suppression system in there does is it increases your occupancy and also the distance to an exit. So if you don't have it, then you have to limit the number of people and how close an exit is. If you have fire suppression, people can be up to 75 feet away from an exit door.
Gotcha.
Then it precludes having to put a second means of access for ADA purposes, I would think, check that.
Yep.
Okay.
So to answer your question too, for prep, that would be part of it, and we want to be hands-on as much as we can. It's our buildings, so we're taking care of the buildings.
Right.
So Thomas Macy had one, we want to be the ones to go in and take down walls. This is all preservation things to us, and we want to find out what's what, than hiring somebody to go in and just smash stuff apart and throw in the dumpster. The HVAC system, no, there will be no splits in that building. We've had an excellent year this year with the system, the size of the system that we put in. We used much of the heating system that we worked with in the building. The building's been totally fine. There's been no sweating on windows or anything like that. So our HVAC system is just enough to make it comfortable for people. We're not trying to make, and this will be for Thomas Macy too, we're not trying to do some super cool system, because these buildings won't handle it unless we tear them apart and rebuild them. So we're very cognizant on, like, you know, we can go this far, this is good enough, you know, so the set point parameters do not have to be 50 for humidity and 68 degrees. So it can fluctuate a bit, which will be the health of the building.
Right.
So,
Interesting.
Make sure when you talk to Tom Hopkins up there at the AAB, that you discuss the rescue platform, because you only have one way in and one way out for somebody who's disabled on both buildings. And the minute you introduce them to a second floor on the Macy, let's say, or the first floor, which is elevated at the Hadwin House, and you only have one means of access in and out, they can't just roll out the front door and out. Make sure they don't need a second means of exit for somebody in a wheelchair. The Dreamland, if you look down the right side of the Dreamland, you'll see that huge platform in between the two buildings. That wasn't part of the original plan. They had to add, because they can roll out at the front door and the back door, but they needed a rescue platform. They didn't have to put another ramp down that alley, but they had to put a rescue platform that expanded twice the size it was in order to come out and sit there for somebody to rescue them. So just make sure that you only have one means in, one means out of both buildings. Just make sure you don't have to address the second way of getting out for somebody in a wheelchair. By doing both fire suppressions and both wheelchair installations at the same time, that's where the economy is going to be, is having that person here, doing them both at the same time.
Yes.
yeah.
And that's how, when I was looking for pricing on this, that's how I presented it to everyone I talked to. I goes, I want to talk to you about, we have two separate projects, but we want you to think of it as a one is when it comes to costing.
But if we only have so much money, we have to say this to everybody, we have less money and about $5 million worth of requests. If we couldn't fund both, would there be a priority on both of them that would go together, or would one building go before the other building go? Have you thought about that?
Yes, the questions come up. There's no easy answer to it. I suspect that it's going to be harder for us to get money for Thomas Macy than it is for Hadwin House. And I say that because, well, first of all, the lowest barrier Hadwin, if we can take care of access issues and we can get air conditioning, we can do a lot of work in Hadwin, and some stuff can wait. We would like to get this stuff done and move forward and put it behind us so we can start bringing it into maximum use. The lower thresholds in Thomas Macy are much higher. There's just so much work to be done down there that it doesn't necessarily have to be done at Hadwin. It would suggest to me that Thomas Macy would be the preferred location to continue the investment if indeed there was a choice. And now I say that because nobody loves the idea of opening up Hadwin to the public more than me, just because the public benefit of that space is absolutely enormous, I think.
But if it was wheelchair or fire suppression, if we could do the same in both buildings, would it be the wheelchair or the fire suppression?
The fire suppression is by far the larger number in both locations, and so and it's the most complicated. That's a difficult one for us to get over.
What the cost saving is by doing both together? The estimated cost saving by ordering two systems rather than one?
In the grant, we didn't want to lock ourselves in here, but the conversations we've had with air conditioning firm, the sprinklers, and some other firms suggest that there's going to be some sort of savings. Now, it's difficult to quantify those until we get the hard bids. So we've kept that number to something like 5-10%. But do you have other information other than that?
I didn't even know.
Don't worry about it.
Barry?
So, What might be an idea for you to do is to get back to us in terms of a letter, give you a little bit of time to really rethink it and hash it out with your group. Because like Linda said, we've got about $5 million worth of projects. There are 16 applicants, all said and done by the time we start going through this. If we have about 2 million available, that will be amazing. It'll probably be less than that. So there's going to be some very tough decisions we have to make, and the more you can help us begin to determine where the best applications are in terms of where it's going financially as well too, would be good. So by the 18th is where we're setting a deadline, is to get back to us with the letter. And you know, I don't want to put you on the spot today and say, here you go, thank you, we're done. I respectfully would love to give you guys a little bit of time to hash that out a little further and come up with something you feel like, okay, great, these are the things we can really begin to work with and live with.
And basically, we're asking you for prioritization with respect to, if you can't have any, if all of it, what's the most critical for you, and in what form or shape does it come with respect to the two projects that you've asked for?
Yeah, one building, both buildings, something in both buildings.
Got it.
Can I?
We'll do that.
If, sitting as an HTC member, I think we would love to see the Thomas Lacey building done, because that's the building the people coming off the boats and all that stuff will see first. We are fighting continually to save the historic buildings as they exist without being changed, because once you change them, they're no longer historic, really. They are historic to 2018, but not historic to 1795. And I think it's very important. You said how many people came off the boat, and this is why they come. This is why they come to Nantucket, is to see these buildings, see the cobblestone streets, and the rickety-rackety sidewalks. But, so if you had a choice, but I do think that the fire insurance is probably more important. Being a handicapped person, I'd rather see the building exist than to get into it. And if you had to make a choice, I think the fire insurance and whatever is really the most important. Because I live in a house that was built in 1830, and when we took down a wall, we found that the whole wall was burned. They had just put up the horsehair plaster, I guess, over it. So they burn very easily, the old houses. So I would make that suggestion.
Well, I appreciate that, and you know that we share the same sentiments. One point on that, while everybody likes to look at outputs in terms of how many people come into the museum, I mean, how many people drive by the mill? And the smile that it puts on your face when you see it running, and we don't see a monetary benefit from that, but nonetheless, it's all part of what makes it's the reason why Main Street is one of the most important streets in, frankly, America, right?
Right.
Well, it's
Right.
a living museum. People are living in these historic buildings. It's not Williamsburg where nobody lives there.
And the man that's maintaining your mill is very good. He's got a really good picture of what's necessary.
It was always working when I was a kid.
Well, it was working too, mine, but this guy is doing a good job.
Barry and then Ian.
That's, I'll defer to you.
Mine's a bit off topic.
Okay, no, go ahead.
But it was the 99 Main Street that Melville actually ate dinner there.
Mhm.
How long have you known that for?
It's for some time,
Okay.
because I think I came from Libby, so.
From the Oldham?
Because I've done that for a long time.
Yeah.
Because the Tuppenses who used to own the property. So my mother grew up with Sally Harris, who married Tuppensy. So I used to eat there as a kid, and I never heard that story, and so I was,
Yeah,
was
yeah,
really
yeah.
curious.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe it was Lydia
So,
told me, I was in the
it's,
house when he told me that.
I don't believe that's myth. I believe that's,
Oh, I-
and
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a certain amount of deduction, I think, that
Right.
happens there, but we believe we can
Right.
make a claim and let somebody refute it.
I was told.
Those are in Washington. Barry?
No, I'm gonna pass that.
Any other questions or anything, additional information besides what we've already asked for from the NHA? Are you clear with respect to what we're looking for?
Yes, we'll come back to you. Thanks, Chairman, and we'll get this to you on the 18th, and I.
Before the
It can be
18th.
before the 18th. The 18th is the outside date.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the last gasp.
And I mean, I would just say in closing that, you know, it's very easy for us to apply and submit applications. It's a lot more difficult for you to decide because you're running into everybody in some shops and you've got to explain all your decisions. So I certainly appreciate what's in front of you. Thanks. We went with 2 this year, which was unusual. I know we were asking for a heavy lift here, but we have to do what we think is right for the organization, and we thank you for listening to us.
Thank
Well,
you for coming.
I think the one point that I would want to make, and the point that Linda made early on, is that you have recognized that we look to leverage our funds, and you have in fact pointed out the fact that you're making a significant contribution. You're not looking to us as a piggy bank, you're looking to us as a facilitator to be able to move your mission forward. And I think that's a really important message that bodes well for you in terms of our consideration of your request, because of the fact that you are participating in this instance and more equally than you're asking us to participate.
We're partners.
Yeah, so just in closing as well too, not only to tell you what to isolate out and begin to prioritize, but also put the rationale in for putting those 2 before us at this point. There are 3 people not here at this, and just having that in writing as well too can make a big difference in terms of people saying, oh, we understand why you're doing both buildings at the same time, and we understand why you've made those the priorities.
Tim,
I mean,
Park and Rec.
Yeah, I mean, you guys did a really good job explaining it today. I just reducing it back into a very simple form of writing as well too, if you could just add it to document.
Great, and we may pull this up actually as 4 major projects we're doing, and to show how that 1.5, this is a component of a $1.5 to $2 million investment.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. But what we're asking you is to help us help you.
Understood.
Thanks, guys.
All right, well, thanks. Thank you.
Are we
Just
decorating
quick-
the glitter white and
I saw
the
John at the
main
off
and
one.
Hedwin, or are you
the other
decorating?
day.
I'm certainly.
Just for-
Yeah, can we,
Linda,
And I
Are you
said,
doing
so John.
excuse me, can we go back to our meeting though?
You're the guy.
Thank you. I don't want to sidebar too much. Thank you.
So, and he's like, yeah, it looks good.
it does.
It looks good. Yeah,
It looks, now if you just get the broom back,
yeah, that's the next thing. We've cleared a lot of the bushes and stuff, so, yeah.
and if it's not an invasive species, no matter what they say. Can I'll see you later. I was gonna call you.
Okay, great, I'll be around. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
I just want clarification. Tomorrow, we only have 2. We start at 9:30, and we should be finished between around 10:30 or 11 o'clock at the latest. I appreciate, it's clear to me that you have all read the applications in front of you because you've asked good questions. But to Barry's point, we're gonna have about 1.8 million that comes out of the CPC surcharge. We're probably gonna have maybe 200,000 of interest, so that brings us up to about 2 million. And my guess is from the state, if we get 200,000, I would be amazed.
Exactly.
That many people coming in?
Well, the point is
There's no
that,
supplemental budget.
well, there was no supplemental budget, and you have had 2 major metropolitan areas come in, and they haven't made any adjustment with respect to that. And even though we're on the 3% and we get the highest allocation, the fact of the matter is that the realistic number doesn't look very encouraging at all.
They need to, they were gonna try to pull those
Well,
two
the
out
thing
of
was,
us.
the thing was is that they put the money in the budget, all right, but it was conditional on there being something, a surplus or something, which wasn't there. And so therefore, it didn't get passed when push came to shove. So the fact is that the coalition and a lot of the legislators have in fact pushing for it because of the fact that they realize how valuable it is to the various communities. But in fact, the dollars haven't been able to, they didn't do the one thing that would have made it a lot easier, which was raising the fees in the registries. That was a really simple thing that they could do because those fees haven't been raised for a generation.
And $75 to file something for a
And,
ticket.
I mean, it's just, but the fact of the matter is that the political will wasn't there to be able to do it. So as you're going through this process, really thinking hard that we have a number that if we get to 2.2, we're gonna be lucky. Okay?
Remember, we've got a lot in reserves.
And don't forget, now,
Open space.
two things. Number one, we still have payments that have to go out with respect to the bonds that we took out, right?
Right.
Okay? And secondly, we haven't made an upward adjustment with respect to the assessment for administration. In 4 or 5 or 6 years, I think that we can take a look at that because we've had to really scramble in terms of trying to make sure we do everything and pay the salaries of the two people that we have running administration. So those are factors that we have to take into consideration as we're thinking about when we're going forward. Now, the only real benefit there is that a reasonably significant number comes out of affordable of open space, and that's the area where we do have about $700,000 reserved. So if we wanted to, we could fully fund the open space applications because of the fact that the funding is there.
I think
But
it's
we have
more,
to take,
isn't it?
we have, pardon?
I think it's higher than that now, isn't it?
Well, the last number, I'm waiting for Brian to give me the
Yeah.
most recent numbers, but the last numbers was in the $700,000 range. And so that's sort of where we are. And the issue is that because of the state thing comes down at a late point in time, really, actually, in a sense, almost after we are making our determination, but very close to the time when we have to submit because we're a public citizens article. We're going to have to make some guesstimates with respect to it and not necessarily have a perfect number, but that doesn't make any difference because the perfect numbers are never there anyway. So,
Right.
Yeah. But I want you to think about that. That's the price range that we're thinking of as a realistic number in terms of what we're going to have to allocate against the $5 million worth of requests. But again, carve out 10% of what we go has to come out of the overall pool, and the stuff that's greater than that can come out of open space because we have the reserves. So you know, if 2.2 is the number, 220,000 comes, so we have 2.2 less 220,000, less the 200,000 that we have for the bonds, less the at least $105,000 that we have, whatever we had for administration last year. So it squeezes the pie a lot in terms of realistically what we have, other than what's already previously committed or has to be committed.
So that off the top of my head is 1.85 approximately left.
Yeah.
But then with the open space, that can be almost separated.
Well, all I'm saying, you have 1.85 that you have available. Okay. But 220 of it has to go to 220 has to go to open space. You can't not give anything out of the 2.2 to open space. You have to give 10% to open space, and anything above the 220 can come out of reserve.
Correct.
But so we really do only have about 1.6. We have less than 1.85. We have anyway. You get the message I'm trying to give you. Is that there is not an awful lot of stuff. Which is one of the reasons why in the past we were very concerned about doing bonds and stuff like that, because of the fact that it restricts you down the road in terms of what you can do. You know, and, I mean, we've been blessed in the sense that,
George is making.
because we've been able to, because of what Brian's been able to do with respect to the funding, the amount on the first bond is down much lower than, because
That's
we've been funding more than you would have really needed. We had a fixed number each year at about 125, and that was more than what was required to fund a bond, because in fact, we never issued a bond. So what he was doing was reducing the amount of the outstanding principal debt owed, so that we probably have 1.5 to maybe even 2 years less. We only have about 8 years of it as opposed to the 10 years that we would have originally. But on the other one, we don't have as much reduction, but there is some reduction there. Right.
Want to adjourn? Are we good?
Motion to
Yeah.
adjourn
Motion to
Yeah.
adjourn.
Yeah,
Motion to
second.
adjourn? Okay.
at 11:58.
Beautiful.
All right.
Good job.
Very efficient.
Tell her to come in, or do you want me to tell her to come in?
I thought the discussion.
I don't know, tell, I would
Tell her.
She was kind of hanging around.